Everyone. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning, and welcome to the Consumer Advisory Committee. We have a full room. This is great, and we're ready to go. So I want to welcome everyone to our meeting. We have a full program this morning, and I don't know if we have anyone on the phone yet, but we may indeed. We'll get to that in just a moment. We have some announcements to make this morning. I want to, first of all, we'll get an opportunity to introduce everybody around the table. First of all, I want to thank Melissa Newman and CenturyLink for sponsoring our food this morning, our great breakfast and lunch today. So thank you, Melissa. Scott will handle some announcements in just a moment. So thanks for that. And we'll have a pretty full agenda this morning. We have lots of presentations in the morning, and then in the afternoon, as you can see from the agenda, we'll have our breakouts as usual after lunch. We have several recommendations to deal with as well, so I hope everybody can stick with us through that so that we can handle the discussion and votes on the recommendations as well. So I just want to also mention that lunch is available for committee members, not for guests. So that is, there's a cafeteria, etc. If anyone else in the room is interested in sticking around for lunch. I want to pass things over to Scott now for a couple of other announcements. Scott?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Just a couple of very quick announcements. First, I'd like to introduce the new designated federal officer, deputy. I just promoted him. At any rate, he's a very knowledgeable guy, has had lots of experience here at the Commission in various policy areas, and it's really a big plus for the committee to welcome Bo Finley, who's working with me to try to even better support all of you.
And he's now on our stage left here.
Stage left. He's been moving around on me all morning.
Yeah, I know. He keeps moving around, but
okay.
Bo Finley. So we're pleased, Bo, to have you working with us on the CAC. So thank you.
Secondly, many of you know Betty Lewis, who is no longer with the Commission. She's relocated with her family to Georgia, and we thank her for her 16 years of working with us. And until that position is filled, and if you know anybody that wants to put up with me doing this kind of work, let me know. Brittany Gomes has been working with me temporarily and doing a great job. And if she's in the room, can you, Brittany?
I don't think
she stepped out. Okay.
Yeah, she stepped
All
out.
right. But at any rate, if you need something, certainly let me know. I think that's it.
Thank you, Scott. And we'll have
Yep,
time
we'll have more
for other
later. Yep.
announcements later.
Absolutely.
So let's quickly go around the room and introduce ourselves. I will start. I'm Debbie Berlin, and I represent the National Consumers League, and I chair the CAC. And we'll skip the staff right now, so let's go to the members. Now, remember, the rule here is that you have to make sure that you're recognized so that the mic is turned on in the broadcast booth in the back. So let's go to Steve. You're the first up of CAC members.
This is Steve Osioskin with the American Consumer Institute.
I'm Alex Phillips. I'm the president of the Wireless Internet Service Providers Association.
Ann Berkowitz, Verizon.
Mark DeFalco with the Appalachian Regional Commission.
Christian Stout, International Center for Law and Economics.
Mm-hmm.
Louise Lanchetti, representing T-Mobile.
Sarah Morris, New America's Open Technology Institute.
Mike Scrotto, National Hispanic Media Coalition.
Olivia Wine, National Consumer Law Center.
Stephanie Pody, NCTA. Itzko Herrera with the National Association of Telecommunications Officers and Advisors.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kenneth Mallory with the National Association of State Utility Consumer Advocates. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that joining me today is Thaddeus Johnson, And he's going to be pinch hitting for me this afternoon because I'll have to leave, and also our intern, Sarah Greenberg.
Larry Walk from the National Association of Broadcasters.
Michael Scott with the Massachusetts Department of Telecom and Cable.
Eve Anderson with Google.
Dana Floberg with Free Press.
Bob Yaden with the Digital Policy Institute.
Yeah, Barry Umansky also with the Digital Policy Institute.
Hi, my name is Claude Stout, and I am with the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Consumer Advocacy Network.
Alex Reynolds with the Consumer Technology Association.
Todd Boyle, Common Cause.
Melissa Newman, CenturyLink.
Hannah Sassaman with Center for Media Justice and Magnet.
Ed Bartholomew with Call for Action.
Paul Schrader, American Foundation for the Blind.
Okay, that's great. Thank you all, and welcome again. So, oh, I'm sorry. We had someone just join us. Yes, you slipped in there.
It's Katie McAuliffe with Americans for Tax Reform, Digital Liberty.
Great. Okay, thanks. So, very quickly before we start, and I welcome our first speaker. As anyone in the inside the Beltway policy world knows, there's this every Tuesday, Friday morning drill at 10 o'clock in the morning waiting for the court's decision on the net neutrality order to come out. So it's, Friday morning. It's almost 10 o'clock. It's possible that could happen today. Who knows? Murphy's Law being what it is, maybe it would be today. But Gigi Sohn is scheduled to come at 10 o'clock. I don't know. If it happens today, that could impact her coming at 10 o'clock. We don't know. But we hope to see her at 10 o'clock this morning.
Can you check the phones for anybody that's on the phone?
Yes, and thank you, Scott, for reminding me. Is there anyone who has dialed in and is on the phone?
Vicki Phillips.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Vicki Phillips, Program on Information Justice at American University.
Welcome, Vicki.
Hello. Sorry I can't be there.
Well, we're glad you could join us by phone. Anyone else?
Christina Gagne from Trail.
Welcome. Okay, great. Thank you. Well, I'm really pleased that Allison Cutler and her great team of folks at the CGB Bureau could be here this morning. So we welcome you all and look forward to your presentations. Allison?
Good morning, and welcome back to everybody. I will be really brief because the team obviously has done all the work and has all the updates. But just want to, I think since we last met in February, I think it was, CGB has done a lot. So just want to highlight a few things here. As you all know, and thanks to you, the Commission proposed the OI consumer label last October. And I want to thank all of you who were able to join us on, I guess it was April 4th, where we unveiled the label and I think received very positive feedback. So, and we had the CFPB joining us that day. So thanks for that. And as I think this group knows better than anybody, a key goal of that label was to eliminate consumer confusion, both at point of sale as well as on their bills. And so today we are going to, Josh Zeldis from our team, who is right over here, is going to talk to you sort of on the billing side. We call it the Consumer No Surprises Project, and we'd like to seek your assistance in helping us address some of the challenges that consumers have with bills, and I will leave the details to Josh later today. Just a quick preview of the agenda and some of the CGB-focused efforts. Karen's going to talk later about real-time text, which, as I think you know, last month, I think on April, okay, time flies around here. And we also are going to talk to you, Lauren Wilson will be here to talk to you about the Lifeline order and CGB's role on the digital inclusion plan. And Michael and Kim are going to talk about the improvements we've made on the Consumer Help Center and consumer complaint reporting. So I think you have a good day, and also mixed in are some of the other areas that are outside CGB. So with that, I think Karen's going to kick it off and give you an update from the disability rights side of the House.
Thanks. Just raise your hand.
Thanks, Allison. I'm going to be pretty brief right now because I'm coming back. So I just wanted to let you know some things that have happened and some things that are coming up. Next week, Monday and Tuesday, are the M-Enabling Conference. Some of you are going to be attending. Some of you have attended in the past. It's an international summit that gathers together approximately 500 people from over 30 countries every year to explore issues concerning wireless accessibility. So the Commission is co-sponsor, actually, of that event, and we will be giving several panel discussions, including discussions on cognitive disabilities, real-time text, and an overview and update of CVAA called the CVAA Scorecard. There is also going to be at this conference the presentation of the Chairman's Awards for Advancement in Accessibility. These are awards that are given out annually. This is actually the 5th year to recognize innovations and very creative developments in research and explorations into ways to make telecommunications and advanced communication services, as well as video programming services accessible to people who have disabilities. This year we have, I think, 2 awards in the cognitive disabilities field. That's an area that has been of particular interest to the Commission and especially the Chairman over the last few years, and we're very excited about being able to focus efforts and highlight the importance of meeting the communication needs of this population. Later in the year, you're going to also see from us a document that details best practices for ensuring that companies address these needs, as well as a white paper. And the Chairman has made note of that at other events as well. Next week, the DAC meeting, the Disability Advisory Committee meeting, one of your sister organizations, is going to be occurring on June 16th. For those of you who are interested, you could attend in person or online. The meeting is going to include discussion and voting on a number of different issues, including issues regarding wireless emergency alerts and community-initiated alerting, HD or high-definition voice, which is wideband audio. There was actually a petition filed before the Commission on this issue some time ago, and it gathered comments, but it's been pending. And HD voice enables individuals who actually have hearing or have hearing loss to hear more easily over the phone. It's apparently a 20% improvement in hearing capabilities when you use HD voice. So there's a resolution pending on that, or a recommendation pending on that. And then finally, a subcommittee of the Disability Advisory Committee has reached a consensus or is looking for a consensus on formatting offline captioning in uppercase letters, or a mixture of uppercase letters and lowercase letters for television programming. So those are the 3 issues that are being explored. What's coming up at the Commission is the biggest thing coming up, I think I've mentioned this in the past, is that we're working to finalize permanent rules, or rules for a permanent national deafblind equipment distribution program, which is our program that allocates $10 million each year from the Telecommunications Relay Service Fund to support the distribution of communications equipment to low-income people who are deafblind across the country. And that program has helped approximately 4,000 people to date, so we're looking to make it permanent. It was established under the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, otherwise known as the CVAA. And that's it for now. I'm going to take off and come back at 10:20 when I'm able to talk to you on real-time text. Debbie, if for some reason Gigi can't be here at 10 and you want to send me an email, I could come down earlier.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent.
Sure.
Good morning. Good to see all of you again today. In my corner of the Bureau, we've been busy on all things robocall. As you know, the Commission released an NPRM on May 6 to begin implementation of the recent amendments to the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. Now, I know you're working on a recommendation on federal debt collection robocalls, but I wanted to highlight a couple of the specific questions raised in the NPRM. The law says that robocalls made to collect federal debt should be accepted from the TCPA's general consumer consent requirements. In the notice, the Commission asked several key implementation questions, including, should the exception apply to calls to service a debt, for example, to help a debtor restructure the debt? Should the exception apply only after the debtor is delinquent on a payment? And pursuant to the law's grant of authority to the Commission to limit the number and duration of these calls, should the Commission adopt a cap? In addition to the input from consumer and industry groups, the proceeding is a chance for the Commission to work with our federal counterparts at the Department of Treasury, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Department of Education, the Federal Trade Commission, and other agencies who have an interest in debt collection. The law requires final Commission action by early August, and yet we are now in the middle of the comment cycle. We've received a large number of comments, and we look forward to getting your recommendation on this important consumer issue. So as you might expect, this will be a major focus of my group for the next couple of months. Next, we continue to be interested in point-of-sale disclosures and billing issues. As Allison just mentioned, you'll hear later from Josh Zeldis that our consumer complaint information indicates that consumers can sometimes be surprised at bill amounts, and we'd like to leverage your expertise in this area to see how we can address those concerns. As you're aware, the Commission has had a long-standing interest in what consumers understand about service before they make a purchase decision, including the price. What they understand up front has a lot to do with what they expect on their bills. So we think this project is a natural extension of the terrific work you did on the broadband label, and we look forward to working with you on it.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Good morning. It's great to see everyone again. During our last meeting, we shared with you what 4 of our principal goals for 2016 and beyond as it pertained to our outreach and education efforts. Today, I'd like to share with you some of our recent accomplishments as well as how we've been working towards those goals. Our first goal was to ensure that our outreach and education efforts continued to align with FCC policy priorities. With the leadership of our Bureau under Allison Cutler and collaborating with our other fellow bureaus, we continue to develop different priority-oriented strategic plans, best practices, and frameworks. Looking towards the summer and this coming fall, we will be getting ready for our consumer and education outreach efforts post the 2016 incentive auction, further development of our cognitive disability platforms, and as part of Lifeline, driving and developing our digital inclusion plan, which you'll be hearing from our colleague Lauren Wilson later today. Our second goal was to strengthen the effectiveness of our consumer-facing education materials. Since we last met, just to name a few, our web printing and publishing division has been updating and relaunching a significant amount of our consumer content and materials. This past March, in a concerted effort for National Consumer Protection Week, we launched a new suite of consumer guides to raise awareness of our TCPA issues. Also, in support of Lifeline, our team revamped and updated all our Lifeline materials. From consumer guides to FAQs, our Lifeline materials have helped consumers understand how the program works, the rules, the policies, and how to know if they're eligible. Our third goal centered on reinvigorating our outreach and education in order to be in line with the industry's best practices and to target specific communities. Just last week, our team, our Native Affairs and Policy, what we so kindly called ONAP, their office conducted a hands-on policy update in Montana for about 15 tribes. We conducted a series of workshops focused on providing an overview of the FCC's Universal Service Fund and its 4 subsidy programs. The sessions included overviews of how these programs operate, the application process, and what it means to be an eligible telecommunications carrier, an ETC. The day also presented an opportunity for ONAP to partner successfully with the USDA. Lastly, our fourth goal centered on the utilization of metrics and analytics. As you may already know, the Consumer Complaints Data Center has now emerged and further evolved from the Consumer Help Center. This update supports the Bureau and the Commission's continuing focus on expanded transparency on consumer complaint issues and our consumer education mission. By putting the data in the public's hands, it helps us conduct more targeted and strategic outreach. It's also given us a better understanding of the issues that consumers are most dealing with. As we learn more about the complaint data, we're continuously revamping our outreach and education efforts. We thank you all for your continued support, and as always, welcome your ideas and recommendations. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Michael Karowitz, and I'm privileged to return here this morning to talk to you about the Consumer Help Center. I've spoken to you over the last several months, more than a year, I think, about our progress on the Consumer Help Center, reporting on various milestones. We achieved a significant milestone in the last couple of weeks, and some of you may already be aware of it by visiting our website, but in case you haven't, we're going to give a quick presentation this morning that will take just a few minutes to show you that the array of data that is now available to the general public about the nature of the complaints that consumers file with us is significantly more than what it was. The presentation is much more lush, if I may say so. There is a lot more detail, and we hope that this will be useful to this body, but also to the general public and to consumers themselves to learn more about what's going on out there in the communications world. We also are providing more tools for members of the public to use to get access to the data. And at this juncture, I'm going to turn it over to Kim Wilde and Josh Zeldis, who are two of my colleagues who have helped to bring this latest development to fruition, along with James Brown, who couldn't be here today. Kim?
Good morning. It's nice to see you all. My name's Kim Wilde. I'm a legal advisor in CGB, and I've been working on the Consumer Help Center since it was just a little spark of an idea in our minds. So just to give you some background, we launched the Consumer Help Center in the end of 2014, and the three goals we had when we launched it was to provide a more streamlined, consumer-friendly way for folks to file informal complaints. The second goal was to try to link our educational materials to the complaint intake process in hopes that folks would read the educational materials and either get an answer to their question and not have to file a complaint, or file a better, more informed complaint. And the third goal of the Consumer Help Center was to provide more data to the public, more complaint data. Prior to launching the Consumer Help Center, CGB used to release quarterly reports about informal consumer complaint data. These were static PDF documents. When we launched the Consumer Help Center, we started providing weekly updated informal complaint data on a variety of aggregated telecommunications issues. And now, just last, I think, May 18th, we launched the new Consumer Complaints Data Center. And Josh is going to bring up the Consumer Help Center for us so we can take a look, we hope.
So there's a couple ways you can get here. From the FCC's main page, you can go to For Consumers, and you can drop down here to Consumer Help Center Data and get there that way. You can also go through our Consumer Help Center, and let me show you that real quickly. And you can see the data center there.
Right, so that's the Consumer Help Center that was launched at the end of 2014. And on the bottom right corner, there's a block that talks about consumer complaint data. And this takes you to the new Consumer Complaint Data Center. So the difference between what we were providing before and what we're providing now is this provides you with disaggregated consumer data. If Josh clicks on the Complaint Data button, and the tool we're using to provide this is Socrata. It's a software that the Commission purchased, which allows us to provide the data in a format that allows people to filter it, to extract it. It comes with APIs, so people can pull the data out in multiple formats and manipulate it. So this data set that you're looking at is every single complaint that's come into the Commission since the Consumer Help Center launched. So there are approximately 500,000 lines in this data set right now. And Josh is going to show us, this tool allows us to take a look at what the issues are and then filter by the issue. So in the past, you were able to look at a pie chart that said, okay, these are the billing complaints coming into the commission. I can see there's a chunk of complaints about cramming. But what we can do with this data set is actually filter and show you every single line item of a complaint about cramming. So let's see, he's filtering. Hopefully it's it's working. This is the same tool that's used by CFPB currently, and we've actually learned a lot about how to present the data, how to manipulate the data by having them come before us. We've worked with them pretty closely on what they learned and the pros and cons of different pieces of software.
So we're filtered here on cramming complaints. You could further filter the method or anything else that you'd want to narrow down. And then once you're done, you can go back and filter on something else if you want to see a different issue, like open internet, for instance.
So one of the other things we did when we started the Consumer Help Center, about halfway through 2015, we started providing unwanted call data, line item unwanted call data. This data is very helpful to third parties who are implementing call blocking techniques for consumers like No Robo. So during 2015, when we produced it through the Consumer Help Center, it was a file that was updated weekly, and they had to extract it in an Excel spreadsheet format. Today, we have an unwanted call data set that's updated daily, every 24 hours, and they can pull it using an API. So that gives them a lot more flexibility in how they pull it and how they can use it. So that's also been a great milestone for the Commission. So some other things that we're doing with the consumer complaint data set is we're providing visualizations of the complaint data. So if you don't want to take a deep dive into that set that has 500,000 records in it, you can actually see visualizations of issues that we think are relevant today. So let's pull up the phone complaint one if we can. So if you click on the charts button, it'll take you to a page that has these 7 buttons that'll show you different visualizations we've put together. So this one's for phone issues, not including the unwanted call data. As I'm sure all of you are aware, the unwanted call data is the largest number of complaints we get on an annual basis. So we pulled them out and put them in their own chart. But these are the other phone issues. And what you can see from it, I think, is that billing is the highest one, which Josh will talk about later today. But so this gives you an idea. If you click on it, you can see the complaint numbers, and then underneath the actual pie chart shows you the complaints.
Is there a pie chart that shows all the complaints and how they're broken down?
I don't think we have an overall one.
We have complaints by category.
Right, categories. So they're done by the buttons that are on the Consumer Help Center, like phone, TV, radio. They're broken out in that format.
But you raised a good...
I mean, you can make your own.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you want. I can't. I'm not that skilled, but anyone with a little more skills than me can.
If you bring up the main page and show the visualization button, is it working?
Sure. But Allison makes a good point that we make all the data available, and so even if we haven't thought about it, anyone on the outside, the idea is that they can take the data, export it, and manipulate it in the way that they're most comfortable. So this is the
Paul has a question. Paul?
Paul Schrader, AFB. Have you tested this for 508 accessibility for the filtering, and also do disability complaints show up as a category that can be searched?
Disability complaints are in there, and they can be searched. And yes, our 508 compliance officer has been working on this with us.
And is it in fact accessible as far as?
Yes.
No, okay.
Yeah, so the one thing that we do is we make underlying the charts and graphs, we make the underlying data available.
Right.
Yep.
So to Allison's point, if you look at the header bar on one of the data sets, let's just show the visualization button so that people can make, there's a little button up at the top, and you can make your own visualizations based on the charts you've made in bar graphs or pies or so all kinds of things. So another feature that we've put in is a search capability. Socrata has something called data lenses, which allows you to filter the data in multiple different ways. So the three things that we've put up there now are a zip code search, a city search, right, and a state search. So Josh and I were joking earlier. We wondered if we got any complaints from the White House zip code. So we put it in and we checked them out, and they are not from Barack Obama, I can tell you that. So we do. We have 3 complaints actually from the White House zip code. So this is kind of a fun little feature for consumers if they're on and they want to see how many complaints are in their hometown. I see a question.
Mitzi? Oh. And then Larry? Is it Larry?
So Mitzi Herrera with NATOA, but I also work for Montgomery County,
right.
And we have the same Socrata open data platform. So a couple things, and Allison, I think you sort of mentioned it. I didn't notice on here information about everything that you just did up there, how I would do that or use it, because Socrata is not particularly intuitive on that front, and it would be great that people could play around in the data if they had better sense of how to do that. I'd also say that Montgomery County would probably be willing to work with you because we have the same platform and there are many others. So just generally getting out those tools. Second thing, I just wanted I want to thank you because there's so much more data that you have made available now, and it's been a great multi-year process. But there were some underlying discussions that we have had about the quality of the data, and so I would just continue to say the CAC would be willing, I think, to work with you to continue to move to just. It's great to have all the data that you can sort through, but at the beginning of it, if the way you tag the complaint or what's called a complaint, moving to implement the recommendations that the CAC had on that front, I think would actually give a better quality of data. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention particularly, or 2 things I guess, is we have later in the afternoon is specifically not on the Socrata, but we have one of the recommendations is about the IP transition. If you can either come back or in that discussion, because specifically there's a concern that there's very little material on the consumer site that helps people understand that this is going, and that's part of the recommendation that we can discuss later. And lastly, Mark, you mentioned the project you have. Is that have to be completed by August?
Mitzi, you got so much in there. I'm just take a breath and maybe hold that. That's a really good question, but hold that one. Let's get some response on this for a minute, and then we'll get back to your other project question, because that's another good one.
All right, starting at the beginning. We do know you guys use Socrata. Josh and I were actually on the Montgomery County site yesterday trolling through the police log because it was the one. So we appreciate the idea of it not being as intuitive as it could be, and we've talked about linking to, there are a lot of YouTube videos out there, 1-minute ones that show you how to utilize it, or actually putting together videos of our own. As for the discussion about the quality of the data, we do appreciate all the discussions that we've had with you guys, and you've provided a ton of great feedback for us. And if you'll notice, this data set is somewhat limited in what's been produced because we're still working toward making the data tell a better story. And the one you raised was the complaint versus the comment, and that's certainly something we're still working on and will continue to discuss with all of you. Did I miss any? Any questions I missed?
The IP transition one, you can maybe bring up again.
Yeah, or if you just want to come in the afternoon when we have that discussion of that item, it really was that you have some really good articles in there that they're designed for consumers to read, that give them information. You do not have one right now that's addressing the tech transition, and it would be helpful the more people are aware that it's coming.
Yeah, I would just suggest, Jalissa, maybe you could join. I think Jalissa is the right person, not Kim, to join you for that, but to join you and ensure that we're creating the right materials, et cetera. Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you could hold your question on the other issue for Mark, and let's just address this for now. So hold that.
Right, so your question was great because it brings me to the end of my presentation and what our next steps are. So this was a big step for the Commission to put this data out there and to procure this software, but this is an iterative approach for us, and we do intend to produce more granular data, but we want to do it in a thoughtful way. So we're getting there. We're halfway, but we're not totally done. So that's our update for now.
Wanted to make clear to everyone, there's a number of you that have approached us at various times in the last year and a half with a lot of helpful feedback. That's been great. The door is still very much open to that. If we're limited on our time here today, but if any of you want to talk in more depth about what we've made available, if you have suggestions or concerns, let us know. We're happy to meet with you and talk with you at any time. So thank you very much.
Thank you. This is great. Really, really helpful. Anyone have any questions? And that was at the end of your report.
It is.
So we have the
6 minutes.
So, Mitzi, we do have a report on the project that Mark mentioned later at 11:30. So do you want to hold off on that question at that time? Mitzi?
Yeah, I'm looking at the
agenda. It's at 11:30. Josh is going to come and talk about that. So that might be a good time to delve into that a little bit more deeply. So does anyone have any general questions for the Bureau staff on anything? Opportunity?
I'm excited to dig through that data. I think that especially with the location information, it'll be very helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. All right. Well, thank you, Allison, and thank you, team. We appreciate your coming today, and we look forward to Karen coming later. And Josh, you're talking to us about the idea that you all have on that project. So thank you. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, we have all of 5 minutes. Let's take a break in place. We don't have enough time to do another sort of break because I do want to be here for Gigi when she arrives, and we'll get started with that. So thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you again.
I'll stay for Gigi. I'll let Gigi stay.
Yeah, staff, you're welcome to stay. And you're welcome to sit. Look at all that space you have.
That was a good try.
Yeah. Just briefly, I thought we were going to actually run over. We started a little late, but actually not that late because we started close to 9:15. But anyway, let me just check my emails and make sure I don't have anything. Oh, you have permission. And you definitely have permission. We only have 4 minutes before she's due. Let me just make. I may heat my coffee.
Nice gig. You can get it.
Well, as she should. I'm striking it from my vocabulary. Not that I'm partisan. I'm going to get some coffee. But I shall be right here.
Because this could ruin my son's life. You got a victim who's like, there you go. And I mean, it wasn't really even he said, she said. People came upon him doing this, and he ran off.
Wow. And they caught him red-handed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So the judge, he was convicted. So the judge set the sentence. The prosecutor recommended 6 years.
Yeah.
And he gave him 6 months in county jail. Which is off of 3 for good behavior.
Right.
Well, and that's assuming there's room in county jail, because you always hear about these ones that like they're out in a couple hours because there's no room.
Well, that's what.
And I don't even think they put them on the register, right?
They put him on the sex register. Which is pretty bad. Compared to what a woman would do.
Right. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So.
No, I mean, like being on a sex register is pretty good punishment.
I didn't get to go to the arrangements. I had 2 meetings today. I had one each with them.
But yes. I didn't even know if I would be able to.
Yeah. Yeah. They were after him.
He's like.
I mean, the nice thing. Are you learning now?
No.
So the nice thing you learn.
I play one a lot.
Right. You can pretend. You really can. It's not that
Oh yeah. No. People think I'm a lawyer all the time.
But one of the things you learn, going to cases and all that stuff. It's the legal system, judges, everything's kind of on each other when there's problems.
Yeah.
Like you basically have to steal clients' money before you really get in trouble. As a lawyer, yeah. Because the other lawyer, like you, like there's been lawyers who have just pulled, like suspension of their license for 6 months. You have to basically steal from them. Otherwise, other lawyers do attorneys.
How many are going to be there?
Well, the color was turned against this guy. So he's in trouble.
Right.
I love Michigan.
Well, it was just so dismissive of the victim.
It's a city with a Dallas, where the
He ran for election.
He's not federal.
No.
Oh, okay. I thought he was federal.
He had to run for election, but
covered his
the
nose.
record ran unopposed. So, but now they're really trying.
Yep. Lots of sadly dying tech companies.
Yeah, there's only, I don't know, I go back and forth on whether judges should be elected or not. You got like probation boards. Stories of what goes on in the lower level courts in Philadelphia. Because they're elected in New Jersey, we have plenty of problems in our legal system. But the appointment of our judges, they're very stable. Like, you're not getting crazy stuff out of it. You may not like it, but it's not crazy.
New Jersey's its own sort of animal. It's its own sort of animal.
Well, we have the most powerful government ever.
Hi, how you doing? Hey, Bo, good to see you. Thanks for everything.
So no court decision today.
Is that right?
Well, I don't know.
No, we don't find, might find out at 10 o'clock, we might not.
Okay.
So, 10:30,
Well,
if 10:30 comes and goes, well, I won't be here at 10:30.
Okay.
So do you want to, so I can talk for 10 minutes and then maybe we take questions?
Perfect.
Like that,
Perfect.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
always tend to talk longer than I think I'm going.
That's right. Well, they got all the CGB updates. All the good stuff. They heard about They heard about the new way that you can look at complaints. It was great. It was great. And is everybody back in their seats? It looks like it.
Hannah, where's the baby?
I know.
Disappointing me. She brought the baby to Kansas City, but she didn't bring it here.
A baby.
She had to leave because
old?
the baby made a mess.
3 months?
No, not a mess, but he was very talkative. It's like Gigi speaking, yes.
As babies are known to do.
Yeah.
All right. The left side was for staff, so that's why it's so empty on the left. All right, we're going to get back together here. Whoop. I don't know if I'm on. Yes, I'm on. All right, we're getting back together here for a very special guest. We are so pleased that Gigi Sohn is with us this morning. Gigi is counselor to the chairman, and she is going to talk to us and tell us all the great things. I don't know.
You guys tell
all the
me.
Great things.
You guys are doing some great things.
All the great things at the FCC.
And I read all the recommendations. I think they're fantastic. So we'll see what happens to them. You guys are doing a lot of work and really appreciate it. I can't believe that 2014 was the last time I spoke to you. Maybe
really?
I just come down and watch a lot, but I feel like it was not that long ago, but it was. And, we've been really busy since then. You guys have been busy. We continue to be busy. If anybody doesn't believe it when the chairman says we're going to run through the tape, just look at our docket. And I know that a lot of you participate, and we're wearing you out, and that's a good thing. You'll get to relax a little bit maybe in the late fall, but we are going to run through the tape. And I said the chairman senses regrets. He sends me instead. But he also wants to thank you guys for all the great work you've been doing, and the recommendations have been fabulous. You guys really put your nose to the grindstone, and we greatly appreciate that. So I want to talk a little bit about what we've been working on, what we've been doing the last couple months that applies to what you guys have recommended to us. And I think first and foremost is the Lifeline modernization order. And of course, this is part of, the chairman's and the commission's broader effort to promote fast, fair, and open broadband networks. So in March 2016, we adopted the Lifeline modernization order. Many of you around this table participated. I was in meetings with many of you. It was interesting, in the 3 weeks before we voted the item, I never realized how many, Lifeline-only wireless providers there are out there. I think I met with every single one of them. But it was really great because there were some concerns about some of the minimums that we had set. So one of the things that the order does, and Jody Griffin, my colleague, will talk about that in more detail. Obviously, the main event, let me just step back a second. The main event was we applied the $9.25 subsidy to broadband. Okay, broadband and bundles of voice and broadband. Now, for the next 5 years or so, you can still get standalone voice, but the amount of the subsidy will continue to go down until it is just a broadband program. Now, we heard from many of you about your concerns about transitioning away too quickly from voice. So in 2021, when we're about to pull the plug on standalone mobile and fixed voice, we will revisit and look at the marketplace and see whether that transition needs to go longer. But I think suffice it to say, the chairman believes that the way that that Lifeline survives and becomes a way for low-income people to fully participate in society is if it becomes a broadband program. So that's number one. Number two, as I said before, we set these minimum service levels, and Jody can talk about the details of what they are for voice and for fixed and mobile broadband. And the idea behind that is that Lifeline service should be a second-class service. It should be both robust and affordable. And this is where we had a lot of the conversations with you and a lot of the Lifeline providers who were concerned that if we transitioned too quickly to very high data caps or a large number of minutes, then the service would not be affordable. Okay, some were concerned that the service would not be free. Now, that's not our mandate. Our mandate is that it be affordable, not necessarily free, but I think everybody was pretty happy in the end. We lengthened the transition. We lowered the minimums, at least to start. I think in the end, everybody kind of joined hands and sang Kumbaya, and we've got a very, very good order. Thirdly, and this to me I think was one of the most important things we did, we streamlined the process for becoming a Lifeline provider, becoming an ETC, or eligible telecommunications provider. And the idea was to have one-stop shopping. So if you just want to provide Lifeline broadband, you come to the FCC. Okay, we have a new category called Lifeline Broadband Provider. And you come to the FCC and you can provide it nationally. And we believed and still believe that that was the way to get more competition into this space. Well, what happens when you have more competition into this space? You get higher, better service, and you get lower prices. So the whole idea is to try to drive prices down, drive service quality and minimums up, and we believe we've done this with the streamlined process. And again, for me, I think that's almost the most important thing we did. Finally, and again, it's not finally, there's a lot more details. I can answer some questions, though I would say if you want to get in the deep, deep weeds, please ask Jody. We set a budget mechanism of $2.25 billion annually all the other universal service programs have a budget, and we thought that, to be fiscally sound, while making sure that nobody gets disenfranchised, we needed to set a budget. And that budget basically allows for growth in the program. And also, we also have a safety valve there that if 90% of the budget in any particular year is called for, then the FCC has to kind of go back and figure out what it wants to do to fix any shortfall that might come. Now, that it could be any number of things. It doesn't necessarily mean we'd increase the budget. It might also mean we would decrease the subsidy. But that's only if 90% of the budget is basically taken in any particular year. But I think that safety valve is also important to folks who are concerned about budgets or caps. I said that was finally, but it isn't. Because one of your recommendations was that we have a digital inclusion plan. And that's something that Lauren Wilson is going to talk about. And the idea there is that CGB is going to develop this plan working with community-based organizations, anchor institutions, governmental entities, the philanthropic community, to figure out, okay, now we've modernized Lifeline, how do we actually get people to adopt it? Okay, some of the problem clearly with adoption is price, and hopefully if we haven't solved it, we've made it easier. But there are other barriers. I was in Kansas City, as I was mentioning before to Hannah, who was there as well, and a number of you were there. And Google was actually giving away its gigabit broadband. And a lot of people in public housing, they weren't taking it, right? Because they're like, nobody gives me anything for free, right? Or who's going to spy on me, right? So you have to have trusted folks. I'm telling you things that you already know. You have to have trusted folks talking to people, to the affected communities and saying, okay, here's what's going on, here's why, you should think about adopting this, and here's how you do it. Because the process is still, we've streamlined the process, it's still not easy. All right, and it's been fascinating to see in places like Kansas City and Charlotte and other cities where there are whole digital inclusion. I mean, Charlotte has like a half a dozen organizations working on getting people online. And I think with this Lifeline modernization, you're going to see that spread throughout the country. Kansas City similarly has several big ones. So that's Lifeline, obviously very significant. I want to thank you with regard to the broadband labels. I mean, your recommendations were extremely well thought out, great instructions. I mean, we really think this is going to clarify the many different offerings provided by carriers and allow for apples-to-apples comparison. I know these are going to be really, really helpful to consumers, and you guys, we know you did the heavy lifting, and we really, really appreciate it. So 2 years ago, I spoke with a lot of you here, and I said consumer complaints are job one, and they really still are. And transparency in those complaints, like who's complaining about what and to whom, is really, really important to Chairman Wheeler. So with your guidance, we've transformed our consumer complaint database and web complaint system. And I don't know if you guys you must have explained this. We have better data and better ways to analyze it.
Yeah,
oh, fantastic. Wonderful.
That's great.
So let me tell you a story. Well, it's not a story. It's something that somebody tweeted to me that was on Reddit. And I keep telling you about it, but I forget to send it to you. And if people been on Reddit, they know it's like mostly, 18 to 34-year-olds like bitching and moaning about everything, right? Well, there actually was a whole string praising the FCC for the fast response that they got when they complained. That's pretty when anybody says anything good about a government institution on Reddit, you know we've done a great job.
Yeah, you got to treat that.
So, I mean, look, we're making the data, we're not only collecting the data, we're making it available for others to analyze it as well. And this is going to not only inform our policy, but also what industry does. And industry has been working very, very well with you guys and with us on making the data available and responding to the complaints. So really kudos. You guys were the driving force. So kudos to you. So our number one complaint is not going to be, a surprise to anybody, are robocalls. Okay, so unwanted calls. And I read your recommendation on the federal debt proposal, and looks pretty good to me. Saw a lot of familiar things in there, so we really appreciate your hard work on that. And our second biggest complaint involves billing. So consumers continue to tell us that they're surprised about what's on their bill, and I think Josh is going to brief you on what we're doing there. And again, this is the sort of the pocketbook issue that consumers deal with every day, and what makes look, everybody's wondering with bated breath whether we're going to have our open internet decision today. Look and see if OGC has emailed us yet. But the fact of the matter is the stuff you guys work on, I'm not saying open internet isn't important. Obviously, I spent a good deal of my life fighting for it, inside and outside the government. But these pocketbook issues is what, the majority of Americans, it hits them every single day, and it's what they care about every single day. So, we're going to need your help again in figuring out, could clear point-of-sale disclosures help prevent consumer surprise? What can the CAC, in your experience, teach the Commission about billing and other issues like that? So like I said, we really, really need your input. So I'll stop there. Again, I want to thank you. I just want to say I saw your other two recommendations on tech transitions and battery backup. Again, it was a quick skim, but looked good to me. And appreciate particularly the direction, and Alice and I have talked about this many times because I always have a bug in my behind about it, and that is the need for the Commission to educate the public about what's going on with the tech transition, because people don't know. Mm-hmm. I mean, my mother, every time, and I talk to her like 4 times a week, she's like, I don't want to lose my telephone, right? It would be great if somebody other than her daughter explained to her what was going on, and people like her. So thank you for that, and I look forward to your recommendations on what CGB could be doing to get the word out. So I'm done, and I guess I can take questions for another 10, 15 minutes or so.
Thank you so much, Gigi. I appreciate everything that you've mentioned. These are all really important issues to the CAC, and I'll give everybody a chance to raise their cards for questions while I stall here. And I just want to say that when we heard the chairman couldn't come this morning, there was no doubt who we wanted to come and talk this morning. That was Gigi, because we know she cares so much about these consumer issues. So thank you so much. I see one card. If you haven't done this before, the rule is put your card up, and then I will recognize you for a question. So I see Mitzi, you have a question?
Yes.
And just raise your hand so we get the mic on, and identify yourself, please.
Mitzi Herrera with Montgomery County and with NATOA. So Gigi, thank you very much, particularly on the Lifeline order. We know that was a lot of hard work, and a lot of folks in this room have been involved in that. We talked several times in here about the need for different federal agencies to collaborate together. Yesterday, the HUD released a notice of proposed rulemaking, which would require in public housing that receives any type of federal assistance for renovations or new ones where there are more than 4 units, you have to include residential broadband service. There is a concern for local governments in the definition of a telecom carrier and looking at it as service to all. When we provide service either to a limited group, so it may be that it's only our government agencies or nonprofits or only to people who are receiving subsidized housing, it's very hard to qualify as a provider. But when you look at the digital inclusion and a lot of these efforts, we would like to have the ability that we could provide service. In some cases, you may actually want to provide that either as part of the subsidized rent or without additional cost. And so we could come back in to talk, but we'd like to know whether the Commission is open specifically to looking at when local governments or community broadband programs are offering those services to a limited group of CAIs, community anchor institutions, or so forth, how to get flexibility in the rules so that we could qualify for some of these programs which are designed to do the same thing, which is to help the lowest income residents ensure that they have access to the internet. And all of our
digital inclusion programs work so much better if, in addition to coming to a location to get training, you can take if we give you a device, if you have internet access at home, the adoption and what you can do with that, it works so much better hand in hand.
Okay, that's a really long and complicated question, and I'm not sure if you're asking whether localities could be ETCs, Lifeline Broadband ETCs. I think that's something you probably should come in and talk to Jody and Ryan and folks like that and really kind of get into the weeds. I think I don't want to venture a guess on that because it's clearly complicated and something I just can't say off the top of my head. It's certainly it's always worth a conversation.
Yeah.
So, while we didn't encourage aggregation, we didn't discourage it either. I mean, it's something that's definitely, but that's a different question as whether localities can become eligible telecommunications carriers under our, national Lifeline broadband, providers. So I think you need to have a conversation with staff.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. I see Ken, right? You have your card up? Oh, no, I'm sorry. That was Mitzi's card. Okay. Does anyone else have a question for Mitzi?
For Mitzi.
I'm sorry.
I got a question for Mitzi. When are you going to Hawaii again, Mitzi? December.
Taking us with us. I'm sorry. Does anyone else have a question for Gigi? No, I don't see a card. Do I see a hand? Card?
All right.
Oh my goodness. Got
That's
Gigi
fine.
and no other questions?
No worries.
All right. Well, thank you so
Exactly.
much, Gigi.
Thank
and
you,
we
guys.
don't have a decision today. Is that it?
There was not.
Well, trust me, OGC is still refreshing the page over and over again.
All right.
So I thought today was going to be the day, but apparently maybe not. All right, great to see you guys again.
Thank you so much, Gigi.
Thanks to Debbie and Scott and Bo and CGB staff just doing a fantastic job.
Well, thank you.
take care.
Excellent. Bye-bye.
Yes, it is. I thought it was going to be freezing in here.
And now Karen. Come join us, Karen. I'm not sure what happened to your card.
My card's over there.
Ah, there it is.
Thank you. Came down just in time. Hi, guys. I'm back.
Thank you, Karen, and we are right on schedule for your
Great.
return.
Thank you. Yep.
Karen, back
Thank
to
you.
talk to us about real-time text.
So in April of this year, I'm sure that most of you know that the Commission adopted a notice of proposed rulemaking on real-time text. And I wanted to give you some background on this, tell you where it originated and why this is so important at this particular period of time. You are probably all familiar with TTYs, text devices that were originated in the 1970s and really were the sole means of enabling people who are deaf, hard of hearing, deaf, blind, and speech disabled to communicate over the public switch telephone network. Little devices, actually they used to be huge devices that weighed like 200 pounds. And actually when I first started in the field of, in this field, I used one of those massive devices that were 200 pounds, and you had to type on them, and the keys stuck, and you had to press return at every line. And we're not talking about the dark ages. This was in the 1980s, and this was the way that people who were deaf and hard of hearing communicated with each other through text. Through a coupler, the TTY connected to the PSTN and sent along tones that produced text at the other end. And of course, the problem was that if you didn't have a TTY at both ends, you couldn't communicate, hence the creation of telecommunications relay services, which put a person in the middle and allowed that individual to read the text typed by a TTY user to a voice user and then type back to the TTY user. In the late 1980s, portable TTYs were developed, making it a lot easier to communicate. At least you didn't have to press the return key, and it was a little faster. Not that faster, though, because still the transmission was only approximately 60 words per minute, and we speak at an average of 150 to 180. Those of us who were born in New York speak at around 250 words per minute. TTYs, again, were created for the PSTN. There was no digital, there was no cellular, there was no advanced communication services, etc. And however, because they were the only way of communicating in the 1980s, 1990s, the Commission adopted a series of rules to ensure compatibility with the public switch telephone network and TTYs to make sure that TTY users could have access to communication. This took the form of several rules. Section 255, which requires compatibility with telecommunications services and equipment. Title 3, which covers support for 911 emergency communications, specifically wireless. Section 225, which required access through relay services, as I mentioned, and more recently, the CVAA's Section 716, which required compatibility with advanced communication services and equipment. In June of 2015, AT&T, let me take a step back. About a decade ago, maybe a little bit less, consumers in the deaf and hard of hearing community realized the limitations of TTYs. Again, they were slow, they were cumbersome, they were adjunct devices, they weren't mainstream, and started exploring another way to have real-time text. So what is real-time text? Real-time text means that as you type or as you create, because now you don't only necessarily type, you can speak, and it turns into text, every character is conveyed to the other person as you're doing it. So as I'm speaking, it could be actually character or word. That person at the other end is receiving what I'm saying, just like you are right now. Compare this with text messaging and SMS and email where you type and have to press send. So that is the difference between real-time text and non-real-time text. TTY is actually a form of real-time text. The problem is that in the wireless digital environment, and especially for more advanced types of wireless services such as VoLTE and Wi-Fi, TTYs do not work effectively. They again, not only slow, let me tell you about some of the other limitations. They have susceptibility to packet loss, to distortion, and transmission errors, which degrade the quality of communications. And again, this is in addition to all their other drawbacks, which even existed over the PSTN. They're also very limited in the types of characters. So basically, it's just an alpha A to Z keyboard. You don't have things on a TTY like an @ symbol. You certainly don't have emojis. And people laugh when I say that, but actually, if we take a step back to what I mentioned this morning about people with cognitive disabilities, emojis can be incredibly important for this population. So there's all kinds of things. It also does, TTYs also generally do not support foreign languages, or I should say languages outside English, which is also a problem because they're also not compatible with text devices created overseas. There was never any attempt at, well, there actually shouldn't say it, there was a major attempt at interoperability. It failed, so that TTY users cannot talk to people overseas in text. So because of all of these limitations, and because making newer wireless services and devices, IP-based voice communication network services over wireless and actually wireline networks, backward compatible with TTYs doesn't really seem to make sense. In the year 2016, or 2015, AT&T filed their petition last year, actually about a year ago, asking the FCC, first of all, to authorize the substitution of a new form of real-time text that uses digital communications for TTY, to replace our TTY mandates to allow or authorize RTT, real-time text, in this more advanced networks. They also sought a waiver for, and I think I mentioned this to you in a prior meeting, they sought a waiver of those TTY obligations pending a rulemaking that would authorize real-time text. And again, even though TTY is a form of real-time text, when I'm talking about real-time text now, I'm talking about it in terms of what it would look like in an IP environment. Since then, Verizon, Cellular South, and the Competitor Carriers Association requested waivers. We granted all of the waivers, and the CCA, Competitive Carriers Association members, are allowed to opt in to the waiver if they file something with us, and we have received many filings so far. I'm not sure. I think it's over 20. Although fortunately they're collectively filed. So what is RTT? It was designed for IP networks. The wonderful thing about it, and this is still an open proceeding, so we're still not determining that we're going to be moving in this direction, but it is considered to be almost universally by companies and consumers to be far superior to TTY technology with respect to its speed, its latency, its reliability, its features, and its ease of use. It can be made available on off-the-shelf devices. This is extremely important to the community. Again, people in the past who needed text access, real-time text access. We know that texting and IM and email is on mainstream devices, but if you wanted real-time text access, you had to buy a TTY. They weren't cheap, at least $200. The earlier ones were even more, but they were not cheap, and they were bulky. You had to carry them around, and they weren't mainstreamed, so that if you were in a location that didn't have one, you didn't have access. Once real-time text is fully integrated, all individuals will have access to it. So it's not only people with disabilities, hearing people will have access to it. What does this mean? This means that the use of relay services will be declining, potentially, because if everybody could communicate with each other in real time in text, then you need relay services less, at least for people that use text. That wouldn't apply to people that use signing or American Sign Language. Most importantly, or if not as importantly, real-time text can facilitate and expedite emergency communications. And here's why. If you you already know that we have rules requiring text to 911. Those rules do not specify what kind of text needs to be provided, but to date, it has so far been implemented with SMS, which is great, and this is still an incredible improvement and addition and wonderful supplement to being able to use voice, not only for people who can't hear, but for people who need to be in quiet situations in an emergency. When you type something and you have to press send, if you have an emergency, you may never get to press send. The example given in our notice of proposed rulemaking is somebody having a heart attack who is typing and then unfortunately doesn't get to press send. Also, when you have SMS, first of all, it's sometimes not as reliable, but also you can have overlapping messages because you're typing and sending quickly, you're typing and sending quickly, the other side is typing. If you have real-time text, the way it's set up is you can actually see what the person is typing, every letter by letter as they're typing. So if you're a public safety answering personnel, a PSAP, call taker, you can actually see what they're saying while they're typing it, and they can see what you are answering while you're answering it. So the response time in both directions is much faster. And there have been tests that have been done that have shown the effectiveness in an emergency situation. So what does our notice of proposed rulemaking propose? Well, it proposes to require, again, real-time text as a replacement for TTYs for IP-based wireless networks by amending the relevant rules to specify RTT support in lieu of TTY support. It also asks about doing the same for wireline networks. And the reason we started with wireless is because it seems to be a little bit further along right now for the wireless networks. There's been a lot of work done, initiated by AT&T, and I truly I've done this a number of times, want to give kudos to AT&T for getting this ball rolling. Verizon has stepped right back behind them in line, and is also trying to do a good amount of work to integrate real-time text into its networks as well. The NPRM also proposes a certain number of features, functions, capabilities that are akin to what voice users have for RTT systems. So the first and foremost that is asked about, and a good amount of the NPRM is devoted to this, is interoperability. Basically, that just means that if you use RTT, you can call any provider, call any person over any provider using any product. This is what we have now. When we pick up the phone, whether it's wireless or wireline, we don't think about what kind of device the person at the other end has or what carrier they're using. We just make the phone call and we know that it's going to be connected. It's basically the tenets of interconnection. To achieve this, the NPRM proposes a safe harbor standard, which is RFC 4103. The standard is already being implemented by AT&T, or is proposed for implementation by AT&T, Verizon, Cellular South, and many international entities, and has also been approved by the National Emergency Numbering Administration, NENA, for RTT use in NG, or Next Generation 911 systems. It seems to be the only standard out there that's been as widely accepted as it is. We also propose that real-time text communications, at least initially, be backward compatible with TTYs. This would be done through inter-network gateways, so that the remaining consumers that still use TTYs, such as senior citizens, rural individuals, low-income, and deaf-blind people, can continue communicating with real-time text users. All of the companies that have been granted waivers there were conditions imposed upon those waivers, and they've committed to already achieving this and indicate that they're all already being successful in doing so. The NPRM also proposes that this particular obligation for backward compatibility be phased out over time. We recognize that this is a very antiquated technology. We don't want to perpetuate it, but we are concerned about the segments of the population that are still reliant on TTYs. Also, certain minimum functionalities, again, that are needed to provide RTT users with the same telephone calling capabilities as voice users have. We ask about these, such as the ability to initiate and receive calls using a phone number, support for 911 communications, latency and error rates, simultaneous voice and text capabilities. And by the way, I forgot to mention that one of the beauties of RTT is that it's on the same network as everything else. So it's on the voice network, so you don't have to have a separate network. IVR and conference calling capabilities, and compatibility with specialized assistive technologies. There's probably always going to remain some individuals that still need non-mainstreamed or specialized devices, such as people who are deafblind who rely on Braille. And we currently have rules requiring compatibility with such specialized devices called Specialized Customer Premises Equipment, or SCPE. And we want to make sure that those people are not left out as we move forward to this new technology. We also want to make sure that end-user devices that are specified or authorized for IP-based voice services include RTT capability. Obviously, if you have the services do it but not the devices, that's not going to work. So we suggest that manufacturers be under a similar obligation to make their devices real-time text capable or compatible with real-time text standalone devices to the extent that these are built. We've actually learned that apparently there are some that are being built. If the wireline phone in your office doesn't have RTT capability, it may be that there are some external devices that are needed, at least for a while. All of the proposals that we make would apply prospectively, as do all of our accessibility rules. The timeline that's proposed is consistent with what we've been given by the carriers to date. And this would be the Tier 1 wireless carriers and manufacturers of devices used by such carriers support RTT technology with all of the above functionalities by December 31st, 2017. And again, we realize this is a tight deadline, but this is what we were given, so we used it. But we also see comment on whether or not there should be an interim period after the waivers expire, during which the Tier 1 carriers would be allowed to support either RTT or TTY technology. And we seek appropriate comment on an appropriate deadline for implementation by smaller wireless carriers, which is consistent with prior rules that we've issued in the past on accessibility. So the NPRM also seeks comment on how this would all apply to wireline service providers, the extent to which over-the-top applications can be used to meet the new obligations versus making RTT a default function of devices, and as well as outreach requirements. This is a big, big, big change. And this change is not only going to affect the deaf and hard of hearing community, it's likely to have an impact on society as a whole. It's going to bring together populations that have been previously left out. But if if other accessibility rules are any indicator, chances are that other people are going to be starting to use this. If you look at examples like curb cuts that are used by bicycles and baby strollers, and captioning that's used in bars, restaurants, and exercise facilities, and now the new Comcast feature on it's talking remote, that is being touted for easy access to programs on television, accessing programs on television. Many of the accessibility rules that the Commission has adopted in the past and that Congress has directed have had positive implications for society as a whole, and many, many people have come to use the features that have been required that were originally intended for the population of people with disabilities. So that's a summary. I went a little bit over, even at my 250 words per minute. But if there's any time, I can take questions.
Thank you, Karen. Does anyone have any? That was really very comprehensive and helpful. Does anyone have a question? Olivia?
I'm not as familiar with the technology, but I'm curious. You've got the December 2017 deadline. Are the PSAPs under a similar deadline to be able to take these types of real text?
So we do not have jurisdiction over PSAPs. So the short answer is no. With respect to people with disabilities, Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act requires PSAPs to make their services, their 911 services, accessible, and that has been interpreted to date as requiring TTY access. So we are looking to the Department of Justice to update its rules on this to not only with respect to real-time text, but with respect to text to 911 in general. The Department of Justice has spoken a little bit about it, and I believe that the guidance that they've given to date is as long as it's accessible, text accessible, you can do it the way you want to do it. There is, I believe, I don't want to be quoted on this is off the record, but I believe there is a lawsuit or a lawsuit possibly pending to be filed against one or two PSAPs with respect to text to 911. It's premature, obviously, to address real-time text. But the short answer is that we do not have jurisdiction, so there is no obligation, corresponding obligation just yet.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Karen.
Thank you.
Appreciate your coming
Sure.
back and filling us in on that.
No
So,
problem. And if
excellent.
anybody has any further questions, feel free to contact me.
Excellent. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a 10-minute break right now, so if you could come back to the room at 10 minutes to 11. Thank you. If everyone can get seated, we're going to get started.
There you are.
There I am.
You're on the...
Oh, shoot. And I just spilled water. Okay, that's not good.
Can I help you with something?
No, it went down the wires.
Okay, that's right. No sparks coming out yet, so you're okay.
Oh, dear. Okay. Oops.
I'm the one that's supposed to do that.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. So now we're going to have an overview of the March Lifeline order from Jody Griffin, who is attorney advisor from the Wireline Competition Bureau. So welcome, Jody, and thank you.
Hello, can you all hear me? Yes, okay.
You should be loaded there with your PowerPoint.
I am loaded, yes. So we have the PowerPoint up. I believe some or all of you may have also have received a copy of this.
Yep.
Oh, great. So as you probably all know, Lifeline is a part of our Universal Service Fund here at the FCC. It focuses on low-income communities and providing a subsidy for currently voice service for low-income households. But with this modernization order that I'm going to talk about here, the Commission began to think about how we can move this to broadband and make this program a tool for providing access to, as the chairman likes to say, fast, fair, and open networks. So that is what what we're going to talk about today is how Lifeline is going to move into 21st century technologies after this order. So this here is a timeline of about the next year or so. I won't read everything on here, but just to give you a broad sense of where we're going over the next year. The order was adopted in March, at the end of March. The effective date of the order is June 23rd, which actually does not impact most of the rules because we need to get approval from the Office of Management and Budget under the Paperwork Reduction Act for most of the rule changes that the Commission made. But it does impact some of the deadlines internally for the Commission and USAC, the Universal Service Administrative Company, which administers the fund, in years going forward. The next item on the timeline is PRA approval. So we're working towards that, and we're hoping to receive approval sometime in the fall from the Office of Management and Budget. Once that happens, we'll be able to start processing applications for Lifeline broadband providers that want to enter the program. And we've given a little bit of a transition period after PRA approval for some of the other rules, like including support for broadband and minimum service standards and things like that, just so all of the providers and the consumers that are impacted by those rule changes know that it's coming and have a date certain that the changes will take effect before the actual effect happens, because sometimes you don't want necessarily to announce, we've received approval and the rule is effective as of today without giving people warning that it's coming. Also, what you'll see is in December, we're expecting we'll see that effective date for most of the rules really be sometime in December, hopefully December 1st. And also in December, we'll see the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau from the FCC present a plan on digital inclusion and think about how we can leverage Lifeline for different digital inclusion efforts. And I believe my colleague Lauren Wilson is going to talk about that after me, so I won't go into too much detail on that. Next year, 2017, and the beginning of the year, we'll see a couple more effective dates go into effect for rolling recertification and for the new budget for the Lifeline program. And we'll also see another wave of approval under the Paperwork Reduction Act for forms and procedures that are related to the National Verifier that I'll talk about for new processes for determining eligibility. So generally, here are a couple highlights from some of the big reforms that we made in the modernization order. The first that gets most of the headlines is that the program will now include broadband support. It will include voice for a transitional period, and then at that point, after a few years, the Commission will then be focusing its support on broadband service after that transition is done. And just to clarify, with regard to bundles, while voice and broadband both receive support, the question will just be which of those services meets the minimum service standards within the bundle to determine the support amount. After voice is no longer supported, bundles can still get support, but you have to meet the minimum service standard for broadband. And also, I'll talk about this in more detail in a little bit, but we also thought about what the obligations are for existing carriers who are participating in the program now, and what the obligations should be for new carriers, particularly broadband providers that want to enter the program in the future. This chart, again, I won't read every square on this chart, but this chart is an overview of the transition for our minimum service standards and our support amounts for both voice and broadband. The first column here, you'll see mobile voice starts with a minimum of 500 minutes and goes up to 1,000 minutes per month over the next 2 years. You'll see that there's not a column for fixed voice. Part of this was the Commission's determination that for the fixed voice market, we tend to see Lifeline offerings that are a discount on offerings that are available to everybody else. So the Commission determined that those offerings tend to already be reasonably comparable to what the rest of the population is getting, so minimum service standards were not necessary. But it did establish minimum service standards for mobile voice and mobile and fixed broadband as well. And as with most things in the Lifeline program, a big part of the determinations here were about trying to balance affordability and making sure that we're getting as much value from the USF dollar as possible for each plan. So in mobile broadband and fixed broadband, which are the two columns that are in the middle of the chart, you'll see for mobile, we start with minimum service standards of 3G speeds and a usage allowance of 500 megabytes per month. Over the next 2 years, that goes up to 1 gigabyte per month and then 2 gigabytes per month. And for fixed broadband, we start with a minimum speed standard of 10 megabits per second down, 1 megabit per second up, and 150 gigabytes per month usage allowance. And for all of these standards, after the time period has elapsed where the order has already set out what the minimum service standards will be, the Bureau and USAC will be using more updated information to announce updated minimum service standards according to updating mechanisms that are set out in the order. What that looks like changes a little bit for mobile and fixed broadband because we have different data sources for what's going on in the marketplace there. But the Bureau is directed to issue notices that announce what the new standards will be after the first few years have elapsed. And then the last two columns address the support amount for both voice and broadband. The Commission determined that it should stay with the $9.25 per month subsidy and said that that amount would also could apply to broadband as well. So for any one household, you can choose, you still only get a $9.25 subsidy per month. You can choose to apply that to voice or broadband or a bundle. And after 3 years or so, starting in December 2019, the Commission decided to start phasing down the support for voice-only service. So it will go to $7.25 per month, $5.25 per month, and then in 2021 it will go down to $0, so it will not be supported anymore, except in areas where there is only one Lifeline provider. And that information, again, will be reviewed by the Bureau, and we'll be announcing where that applies so that people know which areas that rule applies to. And one disclaimer I should add, so a lot of these rules start for the first time December 1st, 2016. For the most part, whenever you hear me say the date, December 1st, 2016, there's a little asterisk that says, a contingent upon PRA approval. So if it takes longer than we expect to get that approval, that deadline may be bumped back a bit for the implementation date. So these are just some frequent questions we receive about the minimum service standards. I think I've hit answers for most of them, except for the last one. One piece on the minimum speed standard for fixed broadband is that in areas where the network does not support 10.1, a provider can receive reimbursement for service that goes below that so long as it's above 4.1. So particularly in rural areas or areas that have not received a lot of network updates, we will still support standards below or speeds below 10.1 so long as it's above 4.1. For the next couple slides, I just want to give an overview of the changes the Commission made to how broadband providers enter the program, what their obligations are once they're in the program, and how they can leave the program. A lot of these changes had to do with the Commission's goal of increasing competition in the Lifeline marketplace so that you start seeing more creative and more innovative offerings. So for ETC designations, the current rule that the Commission kept is that providers need to be what's called an eligible telecommunications carrier to receive reimbursement from the Lifeline program under Sections 254 and 214 of the Act. But what the Commission did do is that it created a new type of ETC, which we're calling a Lifeline Broadband Provider, an LBP, which will be designated by the Commission. And as you'll see, they have some more streamlined procedures to try to encourage more entry into the program. One question we get a lot is what the remaining role for states is. So just a couple highlights. One, to the extent that a state runs its own USF program, similar to Lifeline, they may also call it Lifeline, they are still the managers and the arbiters of the rules for that program, and they administer it if it exists in that state. The states still designate ETCs except for LBPs to the extent that state law gives them jurisdiction to do so. And they still, again, to the extent that state law gives them jurisdiction, they still have their general consumer protection policing powers, and they can still oversee providers that are participating in Lifeline, dependent on state law. So for these LBPs, these Lifeline broadband providers, one aspect that the Commission looked at is how they enter the program, and it created a streamlined process to make it easier for more entry in the program. So there are a couple ways you can avail yourself of this streamlined treatment. One is if you can show through a couple characteristics that the Commission set out that you're more established, that you've already gained experience in offering broadband, and you already have customers in the voice or the broadband market. That will allow the provider to receive a process by which their petition for designation is deemed granted in 60 days, unless for some reason the Bureau has to take it out of that streamlined treatment. Also, if the provider is tribally owned and controlled and also facilities-based, that provider could also use this 60 days deemed granted process to receive an answer more quickly from the Commission. For all other providers, we're anticipating action within 6 months of receiving a completed filing that includes all the information we need to review it. And we also created some streamlined processes for expanding your service area once you're in the program. So once you're in the program, the question is then, what are your obligations to consumers and to the fund? And here we have kind of the three broad categories of providers that we see participate in Lifeline. We have the Lifeline-only ETCs that already exist. We have ETCs that participate in Lifeline and also receive high-cost funding through our high-cost fund. And then we have these new LBPs that are not yet in the program. For the first two categories, the non-LBP ETCs, their designations are broad enough that they can receive support for both voice and broadband. But the Commission used forbearance to say that those ETCs can opt not to use broadband, not to provide broadband through the Lifeline program. And the idea here was just that if those providers want to focus on the voice market while voice is still a supported service, we're giving them the option to do so, or to think a little bit more about how they want to enter the broadband market. The exception to that rule, though, is where an ETC receives high-cost funding that came with a broadband obligation. When they're offering commercially broadband pursuant to that obligation, they'll have to participate in Lifeline as well to make sure that that's also available to low-income consumers in those areas. And the Commission also created some competitive criteria that can relieve providers of the obligation to offer Lifeline voice if we've seen, based on the criteria you can see listed on the slide here, that there are indications that the market has been moving to broadband and there's sufficient competition from other participants in the Lifeline program. For LBPs, they can receive support for broadband, and they need to offer that throughout their designated service areas. And so they will not be participating in the voice side except to the extent that they might be designated through one of the other types of ETC designations. And the Commission also changed how LBPs at least can leave the program if they decide to do so. This creates another deemed granted streamlined process where a notice of relinquishment would be deemed granted within 60 days. I know at first glance this can seem a little strange that allowing providers out of the program easily would be considered a way to increase provider participation, but the Commission deliberated on this and concluded that giving providers certainty about what the rules are for getting in and getting out is a way to encourage them to try Lifeline, to offer something and see if it works. And we're hopeful that This will encourage providers to participate. They will find that this is actually a really successful program to be a part of, and they'll continue to stay in the program. One of the other really huge changes that the Commission made in the March order was it created a national verifier for the program. Right now, eligibility of subscribers is determined by the carriers, which can create some concerns because the same entity that receives reimbursement from the program is deciding whether subscribers are eligible for the program. So this order began the process of setting up a national verifier that would be a third party to verify subscribers' eligibility, using databases and information submitted from subscribers, and working with, as you see, consumers, providers, and the state and tribal entities that are involved with the program. So a large part of this is about program integrity. Part of it is also seeing if this new entity can give us opportunities to create more efficient outreach efforts, can give us more information to evaluate the program and see where it can be improved, and to increase transparency in the program as well. I should say, so we've now started down this road. I know USAC and several bureaus at the Commission are working hard on thinking about how to set this up. It will happen over the course of several years, and the Commission set out deadlines for how many states per year USAC should bring into the national verifier. But it's quite a large undertaking, so we wanted to make sure that we are setting this up in a deliberate way that gives us time to move as quickly as possible while making sure that it's a successful entity. Another item we worked on in the March order was hotspots and Wi-Fi requirements for devices. This is often referred to as the homework gap section because often one issue for kids who need to work on their homework is that their devices don't support the type of applications that they need to research or to write papers. So the rule now is that providers are not required to provide devices as part of the Lifeline program. But if they do so, and they're offering broadband, the devices need to be Wi-Fi enabled by this December. And if they are mobile broadband providers that offer devices, at least one of those devices by this December need to have a hotspot functionality. And in future years, the percentage of devices on offer that offer a hotspot functionality will increase, according to the chart that's up here. So again, this is not a requirement to offer devices, but if you do, a certain percentage of those devices need to meet the requirements that are listed in the rules. The Commission's order also addressed digital inclusion and directed the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau to think about how we can leverage the Lifeline program and how the Lifeline program can work with other digital inclusion efforts. I will leave the details on that to Lauren because I know she'll be talking about that in more detail. The order also set a budget for the Lifeline program. The budget for 2017 is $2.25 billion, and it will be indexed to inflation in future years. If we meet 90% of that budget in any given year, that triggers a mechanism by which the Bureau has to report on what happened, essentially. What are the causes? What are any proposed recommendations for Commission action in response to that, and then present that to the Commission. The order also streamlined our eligibility programs. If you're an eligible subscriber, you can either enter the program by showing your income eligibility directly, or you can show that you're already participating in another income-based program. So in this order, the Commission removed some programs, specifically the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, and the National School Lunch Program, and it added the Veterans Pension Benefit and Survivors Benefit. The Commission also established that for purposes of the federal fund, not impacting any state Lifeline programs, these are the only programs that can be used for program-based eligibility, so states cannot add more programs to this list. This was an area where the Commission, I think, had to do a lot of deep thinking about how to make sure that we're covering as many of the eligible population as possible. We're setting up programs that will be workable in terms of establishing the national verifier, so databases and things like that we can plug into to make the verifier a success. And then, of course, making sure that the programs that we're using are accountable and are programs that we can use reliably in terms of making sure that they're that the people participating in them are in fact low income. For the port-free.
Can you raise your hand so you get and get the mic?
So on the new eligibility, is that the full list, or is that in addition to the existing eligibility?
The green box, so the new eligibility box, that's the full list in addition to showing your income directly. So you could also show a W-2 or 1099.
The full list going forward is in the green column plus income.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Is it plus income or and/or income? Is it an and/or?
Oh, yes, I suppose it's or income. You don't need to show income and program-based. You could use either or.
One or the other. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Another change the Commission made is often called the port freeze. So this new rule essentially says that it's a rule on providers, but it affects consumers. The provider cannot enroll a subscriber and receive reimbursement for that subscriber in the Lifeline program if that subscriber enrolled in a Lifeline benefit with another provider, let's say for broadband, within the past 12 months. For voice, the rule is 60 days instead of 12 months. But essentially, so this does not restrict subscribers from ending contracts and going to new providers, but it restricts their ability to move the Lifeline benefit to a new subscriber, to a new provider within the port freeze window. So the Commission's reasoning for this rule was, again, to encourage competition and better offerings from providers. The Commission acknowledged that there was a balancing act here to try to figure out how to assure providers that there would be sufficiently low churn, that they could offer better devices, better offerings, but also acknowledging that part of this rule means that you're restricting the consumer's choice within that window for moving the benefit itself, the Lifeline benefit. The Commission did create some exceptions to this rule. If the subscriber has moved, if the provider is not offering service or violates the Lifeline rules, or if the subscriber has accrued late fees that exceed the actual cost of the service, then the subscriber can move their Lifeline benefit before the port freeze window has ended. The Commission also made some changes to the recertification process. So even now, annually, subscribers in the Lifeline program need to recertify that they are still eligible for the program. Right now, that tends to happen. It's measured by the calendar year, so it tends to happen by the end of the year in December. And the Commission is now changing it so that the subscriber needs to be recertified within 12 months as measured by the service initiation date. So we'll see more subscribers getting enrolled throughout the year as opposed to everyone getting recertified in a batch at the end of the year. And we've set out a transition for how we handle implementing this rule, given that we already have many subscribers in the program. And so we need to transition them to the rolling recertification process. The Commission also expanded the response window to recertify to 60 days from 30 days. And finally, a few other items. I know there are a lot of items in this order. A few other items the Commission changed in the Lifeline order. They set up a process for an independent evaluator for the program to evaluate whether the program's designed well, whether it's efficient, whether it's meeting its goals. The Commission updated the non-usage rule, which is for subscribers who receive a service supported by Lifeline that's free to the end user. You have to show, or the provider has to know that you're using the service. So the Commission added texting as a way to show that you're using the package. And in a new transparency rule, the Commission directed USAC to release more information about who's enrolled and what providers and what services are being offered through the Lifeline program. And finally, the Commission updated some of its forms to comport with the changes that we're making to the program and the other rules. So I hope I haven't pushed us even further back in terms of time.
Okay.
But
That's us. That's on us, Jody, not on you. So thank you very much, Jody. Do we have questions for Jody? Olivia? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see Steve. Stephen?
Yeah. First, thank you. That was really a good comprehensive overview, and I really don't have any questions directly related to that. But something did pique my interest. Is a couple times you referred to the high cost fund, and traditionally, I guess in the past, the high cost fund was distributed by two methodologies, where you had a statewide model for the large LECs, and then a second for the other LECs that was based on a sort of wire center. I should know this, but I don't. How is the broadband side going to be allocated? Is there a methodology for the high cost for that? I don't mean to be off subject, but
Sure. So just to clarify, so the question's about broadband, the high cost broadband obligations. I think so. I know that that's still an ongoing issue that the high cost team is looking at through the Connect America Fund and other initiatives. Really what we've been looking at for the purposes of Lifeline is just wherever there is a high cost obligation to commercially offer broadband, that's where the Lifeline obligation will kick in.
Okay.
But say for most types of like frozen support that don't have a broadband service obligation, there is not a Lifeline broadband obligation in those areas. So I know that probably doesn't answer your question in terms of what's going to happen in the high cost fund for all of the areas, but I think some of that is still being debated and determined by the Commission.
okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Olivia?
Hi, I wanted to thank the Commission and staff for what we thought was a very sort of thoughtful, balancing of all of these interests, and we were very pleased with the outcome of the order in the whole. And so thank you for all that hard work and for listening to all of our different concerns. We may not have gotten 100% of what we wanted, but we did feel like, it was very thoughtful. The rationale was laid out for how things landed the way they did. I did have a question about one small part of the order, which had come up a little bit earlier when Gigi was talking, which was the aggregation piece of it. And I just wanted to know if there were plans or folks starting to come in for conversations. Like when do you see that sort of taking place?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So thank you. And also, so the piece that I didn't hear what Gigi spoke about, but I think the piece she's referring to is that there's a part of the order that acknowledges that in some areas it might make sense to try a project where really the service is aggregated, but then it's distributed to subscribers who are all themselves getting something that meets the minimum service standards. And so the Commission directed USAC to think about how to set up a process, particularly with the National Verifier, to facilitate those kinds of processes and make sure that on the one hand, we can still make sure that everyone's getting the service that they're supposed to be getting under the rules, but also assuming that the project is meeting the minimum service standards, that people can in fact offer those kinds of projects through the initiatives through the Lifeline program. So in terms of where we go from there, I think USAC is still, that's one of the several things USAC is still developing, and we expect to be talking to stakeholders about how that works, because getting more information about what people are interested in offering will help with that. So I think those conversations will have to do a lot with, how would you enroll somebody in that kind of project? Would you need to talk to USAC ahead of time to set up the project in the National Verifier, and what would that look like, and all of those attendant questions.
Hannah?
Hi. My question is first, I think this slideshow is excellent. It actually explains the timeline a lot more clearly than I've seen in a number of other different documents. And I'm not sure if this is a question for you or for the CAC. Is this something, I have a number of municipalities that are asking me, when is this going to happen? How will this relate to other programs we have set up with either franchisees or something of that nature? Is this something that I can share with them to help them understand the timeline? Or is that, I'm not sure if we're not allowed to share the slideshow.
Well, I think this is on the website now by virtue of being part of this presentation, right? Or at least the streaming.
We did not put it on the website, but we did email it to all committee members.
Oh, okay.
With your permission.
Yes, with that
Yeah,
permission.
so having that information, Hannah, is something that you could perhaps take and whittle down to make it more accessible to others,
Yeah, and I'll also say one thing the Wireline Bureau is working on is updating the Wireline Bureau's webpage for Lifeline. So a lot of this information will be available because we want to provide more guidance. And we're also, particularly for the Lifeline broadband provider section, there are a lot of questions still about how we move forward and what guidance we can provide that's in a more formal, detailed manner than the slideshow. So we're still working on that to give people more guidance. Thanks.
Yeah, good. Thank you so much, Jody. That was a great presentation. Oh, wait a minute. Paul has a question. Paul?
Hi, Paul Schrader with the American Foundation for the Blind. Where'd the microphone? Okay. Just wanted to check in. I haven't really had a chance to go through this order in detail. Are there accessibility provisions for people with disabilities that we should be aware of? And something I actually never had even contemplated and wish I had in terms of filing was the need for individuals to potentially change service at the onset of a disability where accessibility provisions actually would come into play and they might need a different handset, for example, using voice service. Or I know there's a shorter time frame for that, it looks like. At least I think I saw that in the slide. So are there some things you should point, or you could point me to, that we can start making our constituencies aware of regarding accessibility? For example, you've got the hotspot requirement for devices, but what about accessibility requirements for devices?
So for the specific sections that you mentioned, for the port freeze, there's not currently an exception that's specific to undergoing a new disability. Although, as you say, if that impacts, say, if you're moving from voice to broadband, the voice would have a shorter port freeze to begin with. And in terms of accessibility devices, there is similarly no additional obligations for the Lifeline program. I think in terms of accessibility for disabilities in the order, one of the main areas was the non-usage rule. So showing that you're using the benefit if you're not paying for it. One reason that the Commission included texting among the ways that you can show usage in addition to using the voice service or using the broadband service once you have that, is that we had heard from I think the CAC and from other disabilities groups that often if you have certain types of disabilities, at least you're more likely to be using the texting option as part of your package. And so that was part of the Commission's reasoning when it decided to include texting as a way to cure non-usage or to show that you're using your benefit.
Thank you, Jody. And thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and for waiting. Exactly. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move along, but I do have a couple of quick announcements. Lauren, you're going to be up, but before we have Lauren's presentation, I just want to check in, because I think we lost our folks on the phone. I want to check in and see, do we have people on the phone? If you could just let me know if you're on the phone and listening in, CAC members.
Yep, we're here.
Who is that?
This is Christina Gagne from Trail.
Okay, great. Great to have you still there. Anybody else on the phone? Okay, great. Also, I do want to mention for those who might be listening in to the CAC meeting live that you can submit any questions you have to livequestions@fcc.gov. Thank you. Okay, Lauren Wilson from the CGB to talk to us about Lifeline Digital Inclusion Plan. Right, the former CAC member, right? Yeah. Look where you are now, helping us out. Thanks.
Oh, okay. Is this on? Okay. So yeah, I'm really glad to be here today with you all, especially since I know so many of you from my former life. It's good to see you again. I think at the outset, I want to thank everyone here who's already begun offering me their thoughts on our eventual digital inclusion plan. It's been, really helpful. And to those of you who have expressed that, you want to contribute and work with us, we thank you for that offer as well. So Jody outlined the new program. And so at the outset, I also want to say that, we absolutely recognize that cost is the primary barrier to adoption. But we also recognize that there are other barriers like digital literacy, perceived relevance, that keep people from adopting broadband and using it effectively. And so the Commission appreciates that. And, for the first time in the Lifeline order, we've memorialized our commitment to, not just access and deployment, but, digital inclusion as well. And so to that end, the Lifeline order directs CGB to come up with a digital inclusion plan. And, I think Federal Register publication was May 23rd or 24th. And so the plan is going to be due to the Commission around December 23rd. So that's when we have to be done. What do we have to do? We really want to better understand those non-price barriers to broadband and propose, how the Commission can facilitate kind of ongoing efforts to address those barriers. So we want to engage with and consult with, many of you, community-based organizations, philanthropy, local tribal government, industry stakeholders, and we want to identify methods for leveraging the Lifeline program, to work with existing digital inclusion programs and initiatives and increase broadband adoption and digital literacy as well. We have also been instructed to aid Lifeline providers in their work with schools, libraries, community anchor institutions, and other boots on the ground organizations that are serving low income consumers. So to the extent that you guys already have those relationships, on the ground, it would be helpful to hear from you. And what we're really interested in hearing is, how the FCC can be an effective facilitator. We want to avoid a situation in which someone endeavoring to do digital inclusion work is trying to recreate the wheel and overbuild on kind of existing networks and initiatives. So, how can the FCC bring people together, to ensure that the entire ecosystem and its resources are being leveraged appropriately? One example that comes to mind is, the fact that some community organizations and public housing authorities, they're doing great work getting people online and getting devices into their hands. In one city I visited, over 60% of a housing community had taken a digital literacy course and earned a computer. But they struggled with getting the licenses for, the operating software and the security software that the devices needed. And so some people have suggested that the FCC could, bring people together and spread the word about programs like Microsoft's citizenship licenses or the Kansas City Public Library, which has a software lending library to address that exact issue. The fact that a community doesn't know about those resources is a problem. And so can the FCC connect groups with industry reps who can help them, or just, get them that information that they need? Is stuff like that even helpful? I think that's what we want to know. we need ideas from you about kind of what roadblocks are out there and how the FCC can help tear them down, essentially. So, who should we be talking to? What replicable models are out there, and so on. Already, I've been hitting the road to workshop ideas and, meet with different people and see the work that's being done. I did that in Kansas City and in Austin. And so, tell me where I should be going, who we should be meeting with, who we should be speaking to. How can we kind of cull the best ideas that are out there? And I think ultimately our end goal is to create a plan that really takes into account, very social, cultural, and economic needs of communities, so that, together we can arm people with, whatever tools are necessary to kind of maintain their social networks, health, well-being, and kind of just assume more agency in their own lives. We don't want to get people online just for the sake of it, but, we want to help people improve their quality of life. And, I think that's what meaningful digital inclusion means to the Commission. So to that end, we look forward to working with whomever wants to come to the table and to hear your ideas. Like I said, we have to get this work done by December, so it's already begun in some respects. And yeah, just see me if you have ideas or want to talk.
Thank you, Lauren. Does anyone have a question?
Hannah.
Hi.
Hannah.
Nice to see you,
Good.
Lauren. We were out in Kansas City together. I think that what you're doing is really great. Like going to places like the National Digital Inclusion Alliance and traveling around the country is really good, because just the presence of the Commission helps to cohere local philanthropic community organization and government institutions. And so definitely keep that up. I think that we were talking over here, one of the things that really matters for adoption is working with institutions and agencies that already have a literacy and like a granular understanding of the challenges that the particular non-adopting community is facing. And so I'm not sure if there's any opportunity or collaboration intergovernmentally here in DC or with groups like the League of Cities or the Conference of Mayors to think about how can existing resources on a local, like county-based, state, or federal level that exist for things like housing benefits or education benefits, how can we leverage them, whether it's literal finances? Because to be real, the reason why digital inclusion is hard is because it takes staffing a person to do that hands-on work in a trusted and safe environment to make that work, which I know that you've learned and many of us have learned. But even if we can't leverage more resources, how can we at least leverage cooperation between these agencies to make sure that we're working with people who, and to not recreate the wheel, who know that population well? And so, we're obviously very excited to continue to engage with you on that, as are many other people in the digital inclusion space.
Yeah, I think what you pointed out about collaborating, across agencies and local governments is important, and so absolutely something that we are open to and want to be included.
Great.
Mitzi.
Mitzi Herrera with Montgomery County. Thank you, Lauren. I know it's a big task, and we're really excited that the Commission is really looking at this end of it. Just two things would suggest that on the idea of interagency cooperation, NTIA has a report and another version, I think, of it in which they evaluated all of the public computing centers and sustainable broadband adoption programs that were funded through the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. I believe that they did create the digital literacy.gov site where people could upload curriculum. We're happy to help provide. I think one of the issues that comes up a lot of times is it's very hard for the best, kind of mirroring what Hannah mentioned, it's very hard for people who are the best program in an individual community to sometimes get that input, because there tends to be what I see among federal agencies is an interest in talking to somebody who has a presence in 48 states all at once, rather than trying to find the best individual things that may happen out there. And lastly, I would just say is that we are happy to help, but there are many of these various federal government efforts that come out and ask similarly the same questions, and we have a limited amount of time to sort of take away from what we're doing to continually add to that. And it's important to do that, but you'd like to feel that when you participated and you gave these things as input on these federal programs, that out of that came some recommendations or things that were shared across the board. Because sometimes I feel like we are asked the same questions over and over, and it's like each time it's a new thing. Right. So, but we are happy to help.
I appreciate that, and I think, definitely we are committed to finding the best programs, in various communities. And so I would just ask for everyone's help in locating them, one. And to your other point, I also appreciate the fact that, everyone is asking you a lot of the same questions. But I think what's special about what the Commission is doing is that the plan, I think, really is going to be focused on recommendations and next steps, so that this work has a legacy and it's kind of sustained beyond just December. We don't want to just put out a report in December and, the work is done. Everyone who contributed and, was helping out, we want to maintain those relationships and, continue facilitating and convening and doing all of that work. So I think, this is an ongoing project that should have a legacy.
Yeah. I appreciate the focus on the legacy, and I think that's kind of been the issue, is that some of these federal programs, people are very engaged in it as long as the federal program has money to spend, and then after the money is spent, it goes away.
Well, what's good is we don't have any money to spend, so that's a non-issue.
That was I was going to ask that question. If there's a budget there, Lauren, do you have a budget for this?
It's $0.
Okay, so there's nothing to lose.
And I mean, as insofar as we don't have money to be giving to programs or grants or anything like that. So,
Olivia.
But what you do have is, with this order, an ability to convene.
Right.
And that's we shouldn't overlook that, or the value of that, because what you can do, which is harder from the grassroots up, is to get the right people at the table. That information exchange, keep facilitating it. Not just a one-time thing, but maybe. So my question was actually, given the tight timeline, are you planning to have at the FCC a workshop with philanthropy organizations, some of the best practices you've seen from your road trips or hear about from others coming in, just putting folks around the table to identify barriers and solutions and just get some way to capture that?
Yeah. I think it would be a quick turnaround within the next 6 months to get that done, but certainly it could be a recommendation in the plan, something that could happen in the next
good idea.
Year.
Yeah, good idea. All right, thank you so much, Lauren. That was a great information session for us too. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay. I think, Josh, you're up next. Before Josh starts, just let me give you an idea of where we are on our schedule. We've got Josh's presentation, and then we've got some information about going forward with the CAC. I also want to talk a little bit about our working groups. Very important discussion I want to have, very quick, important discussion. So don't anybody go anywhere. Then we're going to break for lunch. We will give adequate time for lunch. We had a good amount of time on our agenda, so we're going to have a little bit less time for lunch, but it's still plenty of time for lunch, breaking for emailing, texting, whatever else, taking pictures of your sandwich and posting them. And hey, it was not the day for the internet order decision. So there, you got your day back, everybody. So there we go. So Josh, welcome, and surprise us now with the No Surprise project.
Sure, thanks. Thanks a lot. And I know you guys are close to lunchtime and people get irritable, so I'll try and keep this succinct. So my name's Josh Zeldis. I'm an attorney in the Consumer Policy Division, and I'll be presenting the Consumer No Surprise Project. Just as this name implies, the Commission is concerned about whether consumers are fully informed about the costs associated with their purchases, both at the initial point of sale and then throughout their relationship with their telecommunications provider. So for the last 2 years, I've been working and helping out on the Consumer Help Center. So I've had an opportunity to take a in-depth look at consumer complaints, and that's why I was involved with the earlier presentation. And in looking at all those consumer complaints, I saw that there was a broad commonality throughout. And that was that surprise was a catalyst for a large portion of those complaints. Generally, the consumer didn't know what to expect or expected one thing, and then they got something totally different regarding issues of cost, privacy, and safety. But the purpose of this project is to see whether more can be done to eliminate or at least lessen the surprise associated with the cost of products and services. Obviously, the more informed the consumer can be made, the more they can plan around those costs, and the better their overall experience is going to be. So consumers have historically been confused and surprised by their communications bills. We've seen this play out in the numerous consumer complaints that we've received ever since the Commission started receiving consumer complaints. And the Commission, in turn, has had a longstanding interest in this area. The 2 truth in billing orders to improve customers' understanding of their bills, and then later the Consumer Information and Disclosure NOI, which sought comment on what could be done to better inform consumers. And then, of course, associated actions such as this group's activities on the 2016 Consumer Broadband Label. And the CAC, in turn, has looked at this as well, and I noticed that in 2010 they also offered some recommendations. But a lot has happened, we realize, since 2010, both in the industry and elsewhere. There's been changes. Business models change. Providers are going away from things like ETFs. Providers are doing other things like adding apps to allow consumers to have better access to their billing information. And we want to get a better sense of whether consumers need more timely cost information, and if so, to determine what's the most cost-effective means of getting them that information. So we figured a good start to this project would be, since we have this new data center, to take a deeper dive into our complaints and see what consumers were saying about billing issues that came up. And what we found were that a large percentage of consumers were continuing to be surprised by the amount of their bills. More specifically, consumers complained about things. They were most concerned about the lack of upfront pricing associated with the surcharges, taxes, and fees that were added to their base rate. For example, providers appeared to make very clear, and this came from the complaints. Sorry, you have a question?
Steve with ACI. Just a quick thing is I'm kind of missing is what services exactly are we talking about and what industries are impacted? I just want to understand. Are we just talking telecom?
Sure. So that's a good question.
Context.
It would be all consumer services.
So cable as well?
That would include cable. That's correct.
Thank you.
Yep. So, for example, consumers were complaining and stating that it was very clear what the base rate, the advertised base rate of the service would be, such as $49.99. That was clear to them. But what wasn't so clear to them was the broad estimate of taxes, fees, and surcharges, which seemed to range from as little as 6% to 42%. And many of these consumers stated that they thought that the taxes were going to be, even if they realized that there would be taxes added, that they thought they would be much more on the lower end of that spectrum. So a review of the complaints indicates that consumers have three primary concerns when it came to billing. It was about pricing, including taxes and fees, point-of-sale disclosures, and the costs associated with switching providers, including ETFs. And to give you guys a little bit of a flavor for what complainants were saying, I took a few examples. In this first one, the complainant is saying that their phone bill is $35 and the related fees are $30, so they're saying almost a 90% upward adjustment there. This next one, they're saying that their account costs $150, but there's 21% in additional taxes and fees, and this surprised them. The third complainant here is talking about their ETF and saying that they understood that there would be an ETF, but they didn't realize that there would be taxes and fees that would be added onto that ETF. And then this last complainant here is stating that at the point of sale inside the store, they were told by one of the customer service reps that they would be paying one price, but it wasn't until their bill came that they realized that their total bill was much higher than what they had been quoted in the store. So this gives you a little flavor for what the complainants are saying. There's many other complainants that are saying similar things, but I just chose these to give you a little bit of a taste. So pulling up a little bit and taking a look at the complaints that we have received to the Consumer Help Center since it was brought online in October of 2014, we see that once you remove TCPA complaints, this only deals with phone issues. And what we've done is we've removed telemarketing, robocalls, junk faxes from this total. And you can see that billing is the next highest category here at 38%, again, once you remove TCPA. 34,000 complainants submitted something stating that billing was their issue. Now, admittedly, not every single complaint filed by a consumer would deal with this specific issue that I'm talking about in terms of them being confused about pricing, but a large percentage of them were when I actually went through the complaints. So that's phone issues. When you look at when a consumer described their issue as being an internet issue, billing was, again, one of the highest categories at 27%, 23,000 in some complaints. And then for those complainants who identified their issue as a television issue, you can see that 38% of those complainants submitted billing as their issue, and that makes up approximately 17,000 of the complaints. So what would we want you to do here? What we'd like is for you guys to take a look and see, one, what are the top reasons why consumers are surprised by their bills? And two, if there are any cost-effective solutions that would better allow service providers to address those sources of consumer pricing surprise. I think cost-effective is something we want to highlight there. We know that lots of things can be done, but we do acknowledge that it should be cost-effective. And then we would like to have that report delivered to CGB, if possible, by October of 2016. So, Mitzi, I think this answers your question. It's not August, but it's not. It's definitely soon and not a lot of time. So we in CGB had come up with some possible solutions that we wanted to propose to get you started. And the first one is what's really the most important, I think, to us, which is to provide consumers more precise estimates at the point of sale. And we thought 5% was better than what seems to be the industry standard of 20 to 30%. We came to 5% thinking that an estimate that was within 5% would be something that consumers wouldn't be as surprised by and might not cause them that as much concern. Our next suggestion here was to provide alerts to customers in near real time. We suggest either email or text to consumer-initiated purchases and fees that the customer incurs. So what would this be? Our thought here was, for instance, if someone orders a pay-per-view movie, they would receive some sort of notification to them in near real time, the account holder telling them that they made this purchase. Now, we realize that a number of providers might be already doing something very similar to this, and if they are, that's great. This was just another thing that we thought might help consumers avoid that surprise. And then lastly here, we'd like providers to clearly disclose the full cost of ending service for things like ETFs, if those are still applicable, or something else that we see more of is known future price increases on bills, so that consumers are not surprised by the higher bills and the cost of switching providers. So, like I said, for ETFs, this may be less relevant now as business models change and companies do away with ETFs. But there are still things like lease charges, and when you terminate service, you need to pay off that lease, and other charges. And we thought one good way to make this obvious to consumers would be to place the information on their bill. So in the instance of a promotion that would be ending, you sign up for a service and you only get that service at the promotional rate for 6 months, to make clear to the consumer on the bill that that promotion ends on such and such a date, and make that clear, as far back as possible, optimally on the first bill and thereafter, but certainly no later than a month or two before that promotion period is going to end. And in terms of ways to execute this, we're certainly open to suggestions. As I said, optimally it would be on the bill, but we realize that now with technology there's other ways to do this, and in keeping with trying to be cost effective, we're certainly open to hearing what other alternatives might be out there. So that's all I have. I thank you for allowing me to present this, and I'll open to any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Josh.
Yep.
Ed?
This is kind of a Scott question, too. Would it be possible for you to send around the 2010 and any other recommendations that we've already put forth on this issue as a CIC? I think it'd be helpful to know what we've already said, and so that everybody's starting on the same page as to kind of the ground that's been trodden and what suggestions have been made in the past.
That's a good idea.
The second thing I noticed is that in each of the breakdowns you have equipment as a percentile. Is that functionality / failure of equipment, or does that include complaints about equipment cost as well?
That would include both. It's the consumer is identifying their complaint as an equipment issue, and so we wouldn't know without diving into the complaint, but we've seen both. And
so it's possible that they could be, if they have a complaint about equipment costs as part of their bill, that could be getting lumped into equipment, so some of those billing numbers could actually be skewing a little higher.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Ed. Katie?
Hi, thank you for that. That was a really good presentation, and I know a lot of times I'm surprised when I get my bill also, and I would be happy to email you, or maybe you've seen Scott Mackey's report from the Tax Foundation. It's focused primarily on wireless issues, but it's about the amount of taxes and how it's discriminatory between other types of, so communication services are taxed disproportionately to other services, particularly in comparison with the sales tax. So you've got, it's about 18% of the average U.S. wireless customer's bill is in taxes. So that would be where a lot of the shell shock comes from. And a lot of us don't actually get paper bills anymore. I know I don't. And so when you actually see the line items on your bill, that's when you find out where all those taxes and fees are going. So maybe if we opened our email, we wouldn't be so surprised.
Yeah.
But I'd be happy to share the report with you.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
Okay.
That's great.
There are a couple of other ones on on broadband and other tax structures as well.
Okay, thank you.
Stephanie?
Just one clarification on what you're asking of our group here.
I don't know if your mic is on yet.
It is not.
Testing.
Nope.
Still not.
Still not there.
Okay. On what you're asking the CAC to review with respect to the first point on your presentation focused on the top concerns of consumers within this pool of complaints, but are you asking us to look more globally at what are the top concerns of consumers? Because they could be different.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay.
More broadly. Yep.
Yeah. Hannah, and then Mitzi.
I was just wondering if you could give me a little bit more definition of cost-effective for the provider. Like, have they specified, or do you have an estimate? Like, printing on a bill, that sounds cost-effective. Like, what other kinds of things or costs are you thinking?
We're just not aware of all the costs. We know that whenever we've had conversations with people in industry that we're told about various costs. And we want to try where they're legitimate, we want to try and factor that in. So we know, for instance, that changing bills can be costly, but doing something like with an application or on your website to send an alert to the consumer might be more cost effective. Is that?
It does. Just very briefly, I'm wondering if in your discussions with industry representatives, if anyone has mentioned the idea of either training people on the other end of the phone, customer service representatives, to speak clearly and honestly about, and to be trained to describe what all those costs are, or if anyone has discussed the making it very easy for consumers to know if a new promotion is available. So if they don't like what they're paying, which I don't think anyone really does, then they can know more easily, either through talking to a customer service person or through something regularly printed on the bill, how they can get another discount.
Sure. Our conversations haven't gone that in depth,
yeah.
But you're bringing up some good points.
Yeah, and I think that those are good points that perhaps we can discuss as good suggestions for cost-effective measures. Mitzi, and then Michael, and then we might have to wind it up.
Mitzi Herrera with Montgomery County and Natoa. So thank you very much for undertaking this. I guess one question, and maybe we can discuss in the workshops, is as a practical matter of us being able to provide you input because we won't meet again until October. So and I know that when we worked on the open internet order, there was a group that was formed and it was kind of on a high fast track. So just maybe we can have some discussion about, for those of us who are interested, what's a good way to provide that in a timely manner to you. I just wanted a clarifying point to Katie's, that fees are different from taxes and sometimes they're lumped in together. We find a lot of times where you have 911 fees, TTY, right of way, that those get lumped in there. We had some previous discussion within the CAC about leveraging some of the models that the CFPB has. So if you apply for a credit card right now, there's a standard format that lists the various charges and things, so it's clear to you, something like that. And I will say that in our own county, when Verizon first came in, there was a lot of sticker shock, and Verizon, to its credit, went back and revised its system so that they would actually present to you, this is what your first bill will look like. But I will note that when we asked them, could we leverage that format so that other providers in the county would do it as well, Verizon thought that it was a differentiator for them in making it more clear, and that was a competitive advantage. So I just wanted to make you aware that there is some background, but this has been I think you're on the right track in terms of what is my bill going to look like and when is that going to change. And lastly, I would add in there, with all due respect to my good friends at NCTA, there have been a lot, you said that this covers cable, and there's been a significant amount of consumer confusion about the fact that there are new fees being listed on the bill for things like broadcast or sports packages, which they're required. You can't get the package without it. It's not an option, but it's not listed in the initial package price. So just kind of looking again at all those charges so somebody understands that this is what's advertised, and with equipment, this is what the monthly bill is.
Hey, thank you for that. To be 100% clear on our focus, we're aware, people confuse or can't distinguish sometimes between what's a tax and what's a fee and what's mandated and what's not. The commission's scope, at least for this project, was to just try and get a total cost up front. Again, we acknowledge that that's an issue as well. We're not sure that you would lose focus in having to go off and look at that as well. Our primary interest here is making sure that consumer gets that estimate up front, like you were describing, I guess Verizon did in your county.
Thanks. And we are running out of time, so let's, Michael, and then that'll be our closing question.
Hi, Mike Scrotto from the National Hispanic Media Coalition. So a few years ago, there was a proceeding that looked at bill shock, which this sounds a lot like, although I know by the end of that proceeding, it was kind of understood more narrowly as use overage fees and roaming fees that folks weren't expecting to incur. However, as you know, that proceeding kind of wrapped up with a voluntary commitment from CTIA that was worked out with Consumers Union. And at that time, I know that Commissioner Rosenworcel had asked that within a year, a report come out that would show whether or not those usage alerts were actually working. I don't recall if that ever occurred at the time, but it strikes me that it would be instructive to understand whether or not we've maybe solved that narrow issue of bill shock and how we did it, and whether or not things that we learned there could be instructive here. And by the same token, if we're still getting consumers surprised by their bills and those problems are still a part of it, that's also instructive, because then we know perhaps the usage alerts and things that have happened since then could use a little work.
Yeah, thank you. We took a look at bill shock, obviously, and what we did there in informing us on what to do here. Obviously, there's some differences between bill shock and what we're trying to do here. Again, the narrow focus being, what is that full freight? What is that full cost you're going to pay month to month, and to get that up front? But I take your point that there may be things to learn from there.
Yeah. Thanks. Good point. Thank you, Josh. This is very helpful. We will talk about this issue this afternoon. And how we will approach this. So I appreciate your coming and bringing this to us. And we are now, we have a couple of things to discuss before we break for lunch, so your patience for a moment. we are going to have our working group sessions right after lunch, and I'm going to turn to Scott in just a moment. He has a couple things to talk to us about, the CAC going forward, which will be an interesting discussion, and also where the working groups will be meeting. Before we do that, I just want to talk for 1 minute about the working groups, and I want to recognize someone who spent an awful lot of time in the past couple months working on an issue. That's Ed Bartholomew, who is our chair of the Consumer Working Group, and he took it upon himself to try and work on a recommendation on the set-top box issue, and pulled many of you together to do that. We don't have a recommendation today, as you know, but a lot of time was spent working on that, and I just want to thank Ed for all the time you spent on that, Ed, and those of you who participated. It was a really nice and good effort. So though we don't have anything to show for it, there was great work that went into it. So Ed, my thanks for everything that you did. And the work continues. So here we are. It is June. We will have one more meeting of our CAC before our charter runs out, and we will need to be rechartered. And I'm going to turn things over to Scott to talk about what that means for the Consumer Advisory Committee. Scott?
Yes. Am I on? Yeah, I guess I am. The charter of this committee expires on October 21st. As you well know, federal advisory committees generally have a 2-year life, and they then the decision must be made whether to renew them or not. If you've been a member of the CAC previously, you know we've had some downtime between one committee and the starting of the new term, which has really cut into our time together and how productive we can really be. So to try to address that, the chairman's office has agreed to allow us to solicit new members for the new committee this summer, with their terms to begin, assuming the committee is rechartered, and we think it will be, with the new terms beginning a day after the expiration of this committee's charter. So therefore, we will be issuing a PN probably next Tuesday, and I'll send you a copy of it with the membership application procedures and the link where you can do that online, and we hope you will. If you are interested in continuing to work with the CAC, and subject to the GSA's and final approval of our renewal, the new committee then would begin its term on October 22nd and run for 2 years. And we would expect that the first meeting of that committee would probably be in either early December or early January. So that's basically it. And feel free to circulate the public notice and the application link to other groups that you think might be of interest to the CAC, that are willing to put in the time and the money that you all do to making this process work. Any questions, anything from my colleagues?
Yes, does anyone have any questions about that? Yes, on behalf of Neil?
It's Neil Goldberg, NCTA.
Hi, Neil.
I just actually wanted to go back to the set-top box with a final word, if I might, if we're done with this discussion.
Well, let's see if anyone has any questions about the timing of the CAC. I just want to say that I think that's unprecedented. One of the issues has been that we end our term and then we wait patiently for
Member
the
solicitation.
next time for solicitation, for the notice to go out, for applications to be reviewed, and for the members to be selected and appointed and blah blah. And we end up with about a year and a half of time to do our work, through nobody's fault. So this is very exciting that we could potentially have a full term to work with. So I think that's great for the CAC, and it's great for the FCC that we could potentially have a full term to work with.
I'll call you back.
So, Mark, did you want to say something about that? Yes.
Yeah, I just have really a question, and it has to do with, I guess, the next session. Some of us, myself included, have been on this for several terms, many terms. Yes. And, is the thinking that you would like some of the older, the long-term members to step down to make room for new people to come on, or do you prefer to try to have some of us who have been here for a long time continue in that role because we bring maybe a certain perspective and group of expertise that is still necessary?
I don't know if Scott and I can answer that question. I think you got the wrong people there. But please don't use the word older. We use long time experience, etc. Yeah. But that's certainly not our call. That's up to the chairman's office to consider that. But I would certainly think that they would want a mix of everything, as always. That they want to have a mix of all consumer organizations. No.
And I would add to that, I think on this current committee we have approximately a 50-50 split of returning members and people who've never been with us before.
Okay, no more questions on that, so we can go back to you, Neil. And I did not mean to open up that. I just really wanted to recognize my colleague, Ed, for everything that he did and continues to do for the CAC. So
that's exactly what I want to say.
Thank you. You have the floor.
I want to recognize Ed. I think he did a marvelous job of bringing together folks on opposing sides of this issue, including my friend Mitzi, with whom she and I have been fighting over set-top boxes since 1996, and we were tasked, at least initially, with trying to help with the recommendation. And I just want to thank Mitzi and her colleague Rick Elrod from Virginia, who's also usually on the other side of that issue with me. And I think they and certainly Ed did a great job. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Neil. Excellent. Perfect. And with that said, let's get lunch.
Wait a minute.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, not yet, because Scott needs to tell us where we're going.
If you could jot this down, please. The Consumer Empowerment Working Group will be here in the CMR from 1 to 1:45. We're staggering the groups again so that you can go to more than one this afternoon. And then at 1:45, Universal Service will be in TWC 488, which is again right up the stairs behind me and to the right. And then IP Transition at 1:45 would be again would be in rooms 438, 468. And that's up the stairs again behind me and to the right. I have bridges available because we have some members have indicated they would like to call into these groups. The bridge number for the consumer group will be the same. It'll be what we've used this morning for the plenary session. I will print out over the lunch hour the bridge information for Steve and Amina and Olivia. So you'll have that available, and you can just then call out to the bridge and establish the call as the call host. and anyone that wants to call in then can do so. The people that I am aware of that are interested in calling in have been provided with those numbers in advance.
Could you walk through that again? So, consumer empowerment.
Consumer empowerment is here.
From 1 to 145.
From 1 to 145. Universal Services is in 488. It's along that same corridor up the stairs to the right.
And that is at?
And that's at 145 to 230.
Okay.
And then IP transition is in 43868. It's that split room, again on the same corridor to the right up the
It's
stairs.
also 145 to 230.
Yes, that's correct.
And one quick note, remember that the working groups are not broadcast, and so that they are not part of the public record.
That's correct.
Thank you all. Now we are going to break for lunch.
Enjoy the lunch. Thank you, CenturyLink.
Mitzi?
So there's only 3 groups meeting today?
There are only
Yes.
3
Okay.
working groups meeting today.
Yes, and consumer empowerment is here.
What?
At 1.
That's the only thing that.
Okay. If everyone can get back and seated, we're in the home stretch here, almost. We're going to take up our working group recommendations first, and then we'll go to reports after that. So I know that the recommendations are a part of your reports, but if you're a working group and you have other things to tell us, if you could hold off, just do your recommendations, and then you'll do the balance of your report later when we get to the working group report section. Okay, so we are going to start with the consumer working group. Ed?
So we have one recommendation that's ready to be voted on, and I wanted to start by thanking Olivia Wine and the National Consumer Law Center for all the efforts and hard work that they put into bringing this together. And I'm actually going to turn it over to Olivia to kind of give you guys an overview of the recommendation, and we'll go from there.
Hi, we've put together a a recommendation on the very narrow exception required by the Bipartisan Budget Act to the TCPA rule, and it basically bypasses the consent requirement to robocall. So it's very limited to robocalls made solely to collect a debt owed to or guaranteed by the United States. We had a robust discussion on the resolution, and actually there are 2 friendly amendments to the version that folks have. So the first one is on the second page. Under the first, therefore, be it resolved that the Consumer Advisory Committee recommends that the Commission promulgate the final rule with the listed consumer protections. Item number 1, calls pursuant to the exception would only be permitted to be made to the debtors themselves, not to family, friends, or others, including employers. So the workplace is deleted, and inserted is the word employers. And then item number 4, the number of allowed calls or texts made pursuant to the proposed rule is limited to 3 calls per month per. Delinquent loan is deleted, and in its place are the words servicer or collector. And those were the only edits to the resolution in front of you. Are there any questions? Further discussion?
Can we, I'm sorry, if we could just hold off for a minute. We're trying to get, I got one comment from a reporter that the webcast is not up. Are we correcting that? Is that what we're correcting? Okay. And is the phone line on, or is anyone on the phone?
Yep, several.
Okay, so the
Yes.
phone line is on, and we're working on the,
And the webcast has an issue right now?
yeah, I got a question on the webcast. So is that the booth, is that a booth issue? At this, particularly when we're dealing with recommendations, I hate to have that not have the coverage for this particular portion of the meeting. This particular portion of the meeting is when we should have coverage.
The reporter may have already gotten what they. You're right. They may be happy. Don't worry.
So if we could just hold for a minute to get our coverage back. I'm all choked up.
Let's do that to you.
Yeah, we just want to make sure we've got coverage.
Yeah.
So folks on the phone, we're just waiting to make sure we have full access here. We're good? Okay, we're good to go. Olivia, you're back on, and if you could just let everybody know where you are. What we're talking about is our robocalling recommendation, and Olivia Wine, if you could just tell us where you are in the recommendation.
There were 2 friendly amendments to the recommendation, and the first one was on the second page under the first, therefore, let it be resolved, item number 1. Calls pursuant to the exception would only be permitted to be made to the debtors themselves, not to family, friends, or employers, or others, including employers. So the workplace was deleted, and in its place is the word employers. The other item is number 4, the number of allowed calls or texts made pursuant to the proposed rule is limited to 3 calls per month per servicer or collector. So we've deleted delinquent loan. It's per servicer or collector, and each initiated call would count as 1 call. Those were the edits proposed to the resolution in front of the full committee.
Second on that motion? Yeah.
We need a second to the motion.
Second. But now discussion.
Thank you. And now discussion on the recommendation?
Yep.
I think it's a strong recommendation and it should be adopted.
Anyone else? Any other thoughts? Okay. All those in favor of the recommendation? Okay. Okay. All those in favor of the recommendation signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions?
Yes, 1 abstention from CenturyLink.
We have 1 from CenturyLink, and we have several others. Scott, we have.
Okay,
let me just call those out. If you could keep your hands raised until I identify you. We have Verizon. We have. I'm sorry, I can't see your card in the corner. If you say, I can't hear you either.
Oh. Okay.
International Center for Law and Economics. Yes. We have T-Mobile.
Okay.
And we have NCTA. Oh, and I'm sorry, and Katie.
Katie? Katie, you're abstaining?
And Katie is abstaining.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay.
And CMJ was a yes on that vote. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, she's not here now.
Right.
Okay. Very good. Thank you very much, Olivia. And that's, Ed, we'll get back to your report later with reports. Steve, IP transition. You've got 2 recommendations.
Right. Yeah. So this is Steve with ACI. So we have 2 recommendations we're considering today. One is regarding the battery backup community outreach and education. That one that you have in your folder went through with no changes. And then we have a second one that goes through the technology transition criteria and makes other recommendations. There were about 4 changes to that. So let's first turn to Ken. Ken, if you're on, could you give a brief overview of what we have in this recommendation?
Which one?
Sure, the recommendation is
Which one are you taking up?
This is the battery backup community outreach and education.
Are we moving this one first?
Yeah.
Do I? Okay. Thank you.
So did you want to give an overview on that?
Sure. I mean, I'll be really brief. The recommendation encourages the commission to work with stakeholders to develop best practices and initiatives to educate consumers about the battery backup capabilities of newer voice services. And for the purposes of the recommendation, newer voice services are those that are provided over fiber facilities, IP-based, and provided wirelessly. Just as a little bit of background, the recommendation was inspired by provisions of the report and order and the continuity of 911 communications docket. But that report and order actually focused on wireline carriers, so this kind of expand things. We didn't have any changes to the recommendation in our little working group, but I'd be interested in hearing if anyone else has any changes.
So, Chair, that's our recommendation.
Sorry, Steve.
I just said that's our recommendation, so we're putting it forward as it's in your packet, unchanged.
Okay, so I have a motion to move and a second? Thank you. Okay, discussion? All right. So all those in favor of this IP transition recommendation signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Central Bank is a yes, and CMJ is a yes.
Okay. And any abstentions? And I see no abstentions. Very good. Unanimous. Thank you. Steve, next up.
Thanks.
Yeah, good job, Ken. So now let's turn our direction over to the second one here. This one deals with the technology transition order, reorder, and criteria, and has other recommendations included in it. With that, we have Mitzi's leadership here to give us a brief overview. In this one, there were approximately 4 changes that she'll go through.
Okay, so maybe useful is, let me give you the proposed changes first, and then I will walk through the recommendation. Okay, so if you turn to page 4, item 6, the very last sentence that starts with the consumer, you would insert to ensure effective and accountable outreach, comma, and then make the lowercase. Going on to item...
I'm sorry, Mitzi, what item was that again?
That was item 6.
Item 6?
Item 6.
Okay. Thank you.
On item 7, on the last line, the word effectiveness is replaced with ability of consumers to understand. And, I'm sorry, it's the word effectiveness and of. Those are both deleted.
Okay.
Then in item 8, second to the last line, after the word and, insert to facilitate adequate. Delete the word what. You keep budget planning, and then you delete the phrase should be considered.
And delete should be considered.
And then in item 9, The second sentence that begins, "in many instances," is deleted in its entirety. The last sentence, "but such competitive bidding," is deleted in its entirety, and it is replaced with a new sentence, "encouraging early outreach by providers to state, local, and tribal governments will help facilitate a smooth and efficient technology transition."
And excuse me, Mitzi, what sentence are you replacing with
The
this one?
very last sentence that starts with but such competitive bidding
But such competitive.
is replaced with the sentence I just read, encouraging early outreach.
Right. Got the language, just didn't get the sentence you were replacing.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mitzi, can you just tell me what you did in 6 again? I missed
Yes.
that one.
In 6, before the last sentence that starts with the consumer, you insert "to ensure effective and accountable outreach, and the capital "the" is made lowercase. Okay, so, yes.
Did you also mention taking out that sentence in the middle? The end? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes. No, okay. Okay, so let me try to, this is longer than our usual ones, and it actually includes footnotes. As we all know, the Commission is working on a technology transition in which we are moving from copper-based legacy services to new fiber IP-based services. And we can all acknowledge that change is hard, but change is coming. So the FCC has gone through a series of proceedings to try to facilitate this so that there's a smooth and orderly transition for the providers of these services, so that consumers are also aware and notified, and that there is some addressing of consumer protection issues as well. So the beginning part of this is really just kind of giving, the first one we tried to also include specific language from the orders so that there was not a lot of consternation as to how we were rephrasing things. So that's one of the reasons why we tried to include the language. In the second paragraph, the issue is that where you have traditional telephone service that is provided over copper, and you replace that copper with fiber, but continue to provide that traditional telephone service, there is a simple notice requirement. The provider is not required to go to the Commission to get approval before doing that. However, if you transition to providing an IP-based service, that is considered a service discontinuance, in which case a provider would have to get Commission approval. And what the order then sets out, if you look in page 2, in the last paragraph, is the Commission proposed that there would be 8 conditions issues that they would take a look at to determine that transition, the consumer interests were adequately protected. So, if you then go to page 3, which is the recommendations, the first recommendation was that we commended the Commission for taking actions to protect consumers during the transition. The second one was that we support those conditions that the Commission proposes to evaluate in these discontinuance applications. And you want to ensure that what the Commission is working to do is to ensure that the alternative services are comparable or better than what's being replaced. And those are the 8 conditions: network capacity and reliability, service quality, interoperability for devices, service for individuals with disability, including compatibility with assistive technology, PSAP and 911 service, cybersecurity, service functionality, and coverage. What we also added in there is that we urge the Commission to move quickly. The thinking being is that the sooner you kind of create an understanding of what the landscape is, the easier it is for people to begin to understand what is happening. The third recommendation is that we suggested that the Commission add a 9th criteria of comparable price. Adequate substitute service should be available at a comparable price to be an effective alternative to an existing service. Item recommendation 4, and we discussed this a little bit this morning. The tech transition will roll out at different times in different places depending on what the ILEC is doing in the timeline. So when certain notice provisions and other things kick in is very much dependent. So it's unlike the DTV transition where you can say, here's the date by which all this stuff's going to happen. It will happen at different times in different communities. But that does not mean that you need to wait until it's going to happen before you start to be aware of this. So what we were saying is you need to have information that Gigi's mom could understand, and that should be posted in the FCC. They have a very good consumer help center. They have other notices about what's cramming, what's slamming, and those kinds of things. So getting out early and putting information so that Gigi's mom will understand and have some place to go other than Gigi is really what the purpose of this is. And we sort of talked about that. All right. What number 5, and this kind of is tied to the previous recommendation, is in a legacy telephone service, all the batteries were in those wire centers, these big brick buildings that you go to that have Verizon's or somebody's name on there, and there's seemingly nobody that ever goes in and out. They have lots of batteries in there. Now the responsibility is going to shift to consumers, that you have an obligation, and consumers need to be aware of that. So the more that the FCC, again, gets out there early, makes people aware, there are other alternatives that you can seek, that is looking at. And the FCC, in a separate proceeding of the 911 backup power order, specified what those are. What this is simply saying is the FCC work harder to make people aware of what those changes are. Number 6 is that as you have those consumer materials developed, the FCC should take specific steps to ensure that specialized communities are made aware of this information. So particularly low-income households, non-English speaking households, communities with disabilities, and that you should reach out to organizations who regularly do work in those areas to give them this information so that they can help promote consumer awareness of that. At the end of that, we asked the FCC, the same way that they came this morning and they gave us an update, is to give us an update on what it is that they're doing so that we can continue to have that dialogue. And that is what people were talking about in the effective and accountable outreach. In number 7 is the way this is set up is that the Commission is not pre-approving any of the notice provisions. So periodically the FCC ought to review those notices that are going out and assess whether consumers are able, again, could Gigi's mom understand what this notice is telling me? Number 8 is, so without getting too technical, the changes that are going to happen, particularly by the way that the ILEC delivers calls to local governments and 911 centers. You have to be able to, when the provider comes in and says, I'm changing the way I'm going to deliver this to you, the PSAP, the local government, has to have equipment that's capable of accepting those calls. In most things, these are expensive changes, and they're not things that necessarily can happen quickly because you've got to be planning ahead for them. So like with consumers, the more that the Commission reaches out to the organizations, you'll see they're listed, and the more that people are having those conversations early, the better the transition will go. And so the commission should take specific steps to start having those conversations. These other groups can be saying, look, you like ask your provider, when are you planning? What's your timing? So that people are sort of working together and we know it's coming. Don't put your head in the sand. Don't wait until suddenly it's on your doorstep. The last one is specifically the commission sets forth notice provisions in which there is a period of time that consumers have to be provided notice. There is another period of time in which wholesalers, it's a longer period of time. And what we're suggesting here is that where specifically 911 systems are impacted, to evaluate whether the notice requirements are sufficient. The primary purpose of this is not to extend the transition, but to help compel that the conversation happen earlier, particularly with 911 systems. The sooner you start your planning, the better off you'll be. But to some extent as well, in pushing these things through various budgets, knowing that something is coming and that we need to be ready can be a thing that helps move scarce resources to addressing the problem so that it doesn't become a real problem for consumers down the line.
Thank you, Mitzi. So, Chairperson, we offer you this for consideration.
So do I have a motion, second?
Second.
Debbie, I have a second from Debbie. Now, discussion? Any discussion on that? Was a really good comprehensive overview, Mitzi. Thank you. Any discussion on this? Debbie and then Mark. Mark?
Yeah, this was a very difficult thing to put together, and Mitzi did the lion's share of the work on this, and Steve did a lot of work on it too, so I just want to commend them both for the hard effort to put this thing together and make it work. And Debbie. And Debbie too. Debbie, and Katie did too. I mean, we all did, but, well, not all of us, but most of us. But, the heavy lifting really came from Mitzi, and so I just want to recognize that.
Thank you. Thank you. And Debbie?
You took the words out of my mouth, but I did want to just motivate the resolution and speak in favor of it. The Commission has made a proposal that, as Mitzi said, would marry both the need of providers to understand what are the rules under which they will be judged when they come to the Commission and say, we really want to shut down legacy systems, and what do we need to be able to provide to you so that you will be able to evaluate that. And at the same time, that people will be able to get the core services that they and benefit from the upgrade in technology. And in the environment in which we are now, these changes are happening. Because there's multiple providers, it isn't like there is one date certain, one moment, or one regulatory oversight. And so what the Consumer Advisory Committee, if we endorse this resolution, will be doing is saying to the Commission, you have a proposal before you. The proposed rulemaking came out quite a number of months ago, and we encourage you to move forward and to use the criteria that you have yourself enunciated as the basis by which you would evaluate these applications. So I want to speak in favor of this. I think it's an excellent balancing of these multiple goals.
Thanks, Debbie. Any other comments? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Katie.
I would like to echo that everyone did a lot of work. And Mitzi, you did do so much work on this. And we did a lot of talking just now, and the changes that you went through were all wonderful and really brought this into line, making it clear what the expectations of the FCC were and kind of how the committee would play a role in that. I take issue with point number 3. I just wanted to have that on the record. But otherwise, I think everything is wonderful.
Okay. Okay, any other comments? Going once, twice? Okay, one more.
Sorry, I'm a little slow here.
Alex.
Your question, or your objection of number 3. So basically, this number 3 is saying that before they can go through the process of notifying everybody the copper is going to be retired, they have to have a substitute, whether it's fiber or wireless or something like that. Is that what you were saying you have objection to?
No, it's just that it adds a 9th criteria.
So if I can maybe help clarify, when you go to discontinue a service, which in most cases means that you're going to move to an IP-based service, the provider submits an application that says, here's what I'm going to substitute, the new service. And if you look in number 2, in that application, the FCC is going to ask them to tell us about these 8 criteria. What recommendation 3 says is that there should be a 9th criteria, which is comparable price. And again, these are all criteria for the commission to consider. They have not established any bright line tests. So, again, what it's saying is that is something that you should consider, you should review as part of the whole analysis.
Let me.
Debbie, yeah, sorry.
I
I have Debbie and then I have Ann.
And to
So just
amplify,
make sure.
Alex, that excellent explanation.
Is your mic on, Deb?
How do
I don't
turn
think it
it
is.
on?
Just raise your hand. You don't. Yeah, they turn it on. Go ahead.
To amplify what Mitzi just said, if a carrier wants to discontinue a service, the current obligation, statutory and regulatory obligation, is that for a discontinuance, they petition the commission, and the commission will evaluate whether there is an, quote, adequate substitute. What this proposed rulemaking is about is how the commission should evaluate what is an adequate substitute. They've proposed these 9 criteria. The recommendation from the IP transition subcommittee is that comparable price is another criteria to consider. The discontinuing company themselves do not have to provide the adequate substitute. They have to demonstrate that consumers will have access to an adequate substitute. It could be their own. It could be other providers in the area.
Ann?
Okay. And we went many rounds on this, and I had a difficulty, and we had a lot of compromise because I was very loath to have anything that was type of a rate regulation. And sort of adding on what Debbie says, if provider A is providing, a copper voice service for $20 a month, and they're switching to an IP voice, it doesn't have to be $20 a month, but we want to make, we think the commission should consider if it's going to be $70 a month suddenly. It should, we're just saying it's something to look at. It should be comparable. We're not saying you have to say it's the same price, but should be comparably available. And and I was with one. I didn't love this one, but we compromised and we had a lot of consensus, and I think where we landed was okay with the should be comparable.
Okay. Very good. All right, looks like we're ready for a vote. All those who are in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those who are opposed and those who are abstaining signify by raising your hand. Keep it up so I can recognize you as I go around the table. So we have Katie again, and then Steve, Posiask, and Going around, the next one I see is T-Mobile Louisa, Stephanie from NCTA, and Google. I've got you there. And I think that's it, right?
We also have CenturyLink abstaining, and Common Cause, if Todd's not back, was a yes.
Todd is back, and he's a yes. Okay,
yes,
good.
Correct.
All right. Did I catch everybody's vote? Very good.
And I should have also said CMJ was a yes as well.
Okay. Excellent.
All right.
Great. Thanks to all the working groups for your excellent work over the past few months on these recommendations. Appreciate it. A lot of work has gone on, reflected in recommendations, reflected in discussion, and not having recommendations. So thank you all for all your work. So now I want to turn to all of you for reports. Mitzi, the question is related to?
I just, on the last one, I just actually wanted to thank Steve, because we did have some ideological things back and forth, and it's a recommendation that in the end he ended up abstaining on, but we did work together and the process to move that forward. So I just actually want to thank him for his very fair-minded leadership on this.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
Steve.
you. Yes, thank you, Steve. Thanks, Mitzi, for that remark. All right, so let's go back now around. We had 3 groups that met today, so let's start with those. And Ed, do you want to start off with the Consumer Working Group report?
Sure. So we did spend a fair amount of the time during the discussion talking about the TCPA recommendation that was passed and just kind of clarifying that and answering questions and things that people had. We also took another look at the set-top box issue. There will be an email going around to the full CAC asking you again to indicate whether or not you're interested in participating in discussions on this. And when that goes out, the 2 most recent draft versions that had been discussed as of about 10 days ago will also be going around. Mitzi hopes to convene a bunch of people in a single room to talk through this at some point between now and the end of the month.
Before June 26th.
Before June 26th.
Yep.
So the timeline keeps moving forward closer and closer.
And I think what we'll do is make that offer to anybody on the CAC. Is that right, Ed?
Yes, that's going to go out to everyone, full CAC listserv. Additionally, I think that the Consumer Working Group is going to be looking at the request that we received earlier today around surprise and price surprise and surprise on bills, however we're phrasing that. I'm going to say we're going to come up with a more eloquent title than what we heard earlier. I'm just going to go for it. We're going to find a good title for this. That's something that we'll be teeing up as a working group. I think that also is one that has wide possible interests that the other people who are not always on the consumer group might want to participate. So again, that's probably something that's going to go out to the full CAC, and then we'll decide to go from there. I think, Debbie, you had some clarifying questions that you want to get out to staff here just to make sure that we understand the full scope of what we're being asked. So that we don't devote a lot of time to something that we're not being asked to do in the first place. So look for those to start shortly, and as was mentioned, we kind of have an October deadline on that. So that will be something that we'll be working on between now and October. I agree with the comment from earlier today that if it extends past October, there's a possibility that there's a completely different makeup to the CAC, and a lot of things might get lost in transition, so to speak. So I think if we do tee it up and decide to work on it, we should give ourselves a stop point of October.
Yeah,
for our
I
product.
mean, we can always have a sort of a part 1. This is where we are as of October, part 1. This is what we recommend, and leave it to the next CAC to figure out how to pick it up from there. But we'll talk about that further. Thank you, Ed. Excellent. Steve, you want to tell us if there's anything else to report outside of your recommendations?
Well, right. Well, most of our time was consumed on that. There were two issues that were just brought up very briefly that we'll probably look into on our next call. One was a potential follow-up recommendation that Mark made, and I see he stepped away now. So that's one thing that we'll follow up on. And the second was Bob had suggested a potential expert to talk about E911, which might be another issue that we could follow up on as well. Otherwise, I have nothing else to report.
Okay, great. Thank you. Universal service, Olivia. Not on yet. Olivia, raise your hand again.
Oh, okay.
Not yet.
The Universal Service Committee.
Not yet.
Oh, really?
Is she on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So, just as a heads up, we are going to be working on another resolution in fairly short order to help along the Lifeline digital inclusion plan process. So Hannah at CMJ and Sarah at OTI have graciously volunteered to spearhead a recommendation. It'll include looking at best practice, recommendations around best practices, recent research on adoption and barriers. We also talked about having additional conversations. One line of inquiry is maybe, is there some linkage for those consumers who are receiving the low-income equipment that Karen spoke about? Would they be eligible for Lifeline, or are those two programs to be kept separate and apart? Then there was discussion about, in the Lifeline modernization order, in the development of the national eligibility verifier, there's language about stakeholder engagement and diverse array of stakeholders. So we are looking to find a way to insert ourselves into that discussion, and there was interest around the table. Various people would be interested in pursuing just how we do that. So we'll be looking into that if others are also involved. And then the final issue that we talked about is a perennial, is again sort of keeping our eyes on the tribal issues with the Lifeline program, because some of those issues were queued up earlier and have been sort of shifted to another proceeding that'll be starting maybe towards the end of the year.
Okay, thank you very much, Olivia. Our other three working groups did not meet today, but I don't know if any of you have anything to report or if there is any leadership here to report your activities. We have broadband privacy. Barry, you're here from media, so you want to report anything from your working group? You want to grab the mic?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Hello. Nothing to report right now, but it's our plan to have a conference call sometime before this month is out, just to touch base on some potential issues to raise. That's all.
Great. And again, I don't think we have any.
I also believe that broadband is planning a call in the near future, possibly.
Great.
As is privacy.
Great. Anyone from either of those groups have any thoughts they want to add, privacy or broadband? Okay. Okay. Again, working groups, thanks for all of your work. It has been a very productive year so far for our CAC and recommendations and activities. So I appreciate all the work that has been done. So we have comments from the public. That's public in the room here, and I don't think I see, I don't know, anybody? Is there anybody who has comment? We do have a question that has come in on the line, and I think the easiest thing to do when we get questions like this is to refer them to our working group, and this individual has a very interesting and lengthy question about service in a rural area, and also someone who has disability concerns as well. So I would be interested in referring this to our working group to take a longer look at. It's difficult for our working group to address lengthier issues, but it looks like it's an issue definitely for rural service. So, yes, you absolutely. So, do we have a mic set up? Okay, yeah, come on over and use that mic.
We don't have a floor mic.
And you can identify yourself. Have a person in the pub.
Good afternoon. My name is Julius Ware. I'm a graduate MPA student from Rutgers, and we have the pleasure of interning with Mitzi at Ultra Montgomery at Montgomery County, Maryland. I am very pleased and to be able to be a part of this, and it's very exciting when I think about, I sat in the room as you debated, you marked up some legislation or some suggestions that's going to impact me. Whenever I heard you talking about that I can only get 3 calls, I was thinking about per instance, per occasion, and I was thinking about all those loans. So they're going to call me 3 times for each loan. But what I appreciate is that you said they can't call you between this hour and that hour. I can opt out, and they can't harass me. And if they do, I have cause. I have a recourse. So I was sitting here listening to that and reading it and then listening to it and just thinking about how painstaking and you went through this to protect my rights, to protect, to make sure that I'm not harassed. And just witnessing that, I'm thankful to have been part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Julius. Appreciate your comment. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Wait, we have one other one.
Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Intishan Chowdhury. I'm also a public policy fellow at Montgomery County Government from Rutgers University, Newark, in the BA MPA program. I just wanted to congratulate the 3 working groups on getting your 3 recommendations passed to the Consumer Advisory Committee. That would be going up to the FCC. It was great to see compromise here today and to see a lot of debate and conversations going on. We learn about it in the classroom every single day when our professors and people that practice the field talk about technology and public service, and we were able to see that here today at first glance. We saw collaboration from all 3 sectors, and it means a lot. And when I had learned that one of the recommendations was spearheaded by Mitzi, I was like cheering in the back, So it's great to be here, and congratulations to all of you, and thank you for everything that you do, because it impacts the communities at large. So thank you again for having me here.
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both for your remarks. We appreciate that. Excellent. So we have one final comment on our agenda. That's to talk about our next meeting date.
Can I just make a quick comment?
Yes, Paul.
So I spoke with Bo about this earlier. This is Paul Schrader, AFB, and this may be sufficient. Hopefully we don't need a resolution on this point, but I'm finding that increasingly we're getting PowerPoints from staff at the very last minute. For those of you who can see the PowerPoint, that may be okay. For those of us who cannot and are trying to look at it and listen to it, perhaps trying to convert it in the 2 hours, if we get it in the morning before the meeting, that's really not working. What I would say is we ought to have a 48-hour rule, and I'm quite sure this is not Scott. I'm quite sure that he's not getting the material in a timely fashion. So I don't know if we need to make a committee rule on this, or if just asking our DFO to communicate and Scott to communicate to the commission that this really should be something that we are able to see 48 hours in advance so that we can either convert them or make them accessible. That would certainly be welcome. So I'm hoping we can just do that as a process point without having to do a resolution or something.
Thank you, Paul. And
You've been heard, Paul. No
yeah, and that just seems like good policy,
Yep.
period. So thank you, Paul, for that thought.
And similarly, the sooner that we can get recommendations to you, the better. So you have time to digest them and such.
Right.
Which brings me to a quick question. May I?
Yeah, sure.
Madam Chair? This time around, we've traditionally sent out all of the advanced materials as a package. Now, for example, the tech transition group recommendations I've had for a good 2 weeks. The final versions that were then amended today. Would it be helpful for those to be sent out piecemeal, or would you still prefer me to do them all in one package? I'm a little fearful of doing the piecemeal thing, but on the other hand, it would provide you with more time to review and digest and so forth. But I'll do whatever you might think is a good idea. Anybody have any strong feelings either way?
Ann?
Yeah, I actually prefer the package because while I hear what you're saying, piecemeal, we might have a little more time on one or the other. But the package, I see the email, I know everything that's in it. Just, it's easier to find.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's we just have to make sure people get their stuff in on time, and I support Paul's policy recommendation.
I wasn't, reflecting badly on anybody. People were working very, very hard on their recommendations, and I fully understand that they always don't come to fruition as quickly as anybody would like, and just want to make sure that...
Stephanie?
I think also it's really nice to have the package, but to the extent we have something earlier, maybe you could send that earlier and again as part of the package right before the meeting?
Yep.
That's a good idea.
I think that's a good suggestion.
Ken? Ken, did you have something?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I think that's a good suggestion.
Okay.
Yeah. That sounds like a good deal. Do both.
All right.
Okay, thanks. Now, as far as our next meeting date, we want to have one more meeting before our charter runs out on October 21st. So we have two possible meeting dates to run by you when we have availability here in this room, right, Scott?
Yes.
And so we could do either one. We want to just check and see if there's one date that doesn't work for a large number of you that we should steer away from. That happens from time to time. We've checked holidays and things like that, so we've steered ourselves away from those. But Scott, you want to just lay out those two possible dates?
The two dates are Fridays, the 7th of October or the 14th of October.
So I see folks looking at their calendars.
That's what we had in mind.
And if anyone has an exotic trip or a big conference.
Invite us along and we won't care.
Yeah, right. Or a big conference that you have or know about, if you could speak now or let us know. Otherwise, we will just figure out which one of those dates work and set it. Yeah, Larry?
I think, is Columbus Day the 10th?
11th, I believe.
Is it the 10th or the 11th?
It's not on the Monday.
Whatever that Monday is.
That Monday, yeah.
So I would vote for the 14th, just...
So not to do it the Friday before that Monday.
Someone might want to take a 4-day weekend. I don't know.
Yeah, it might affect our getting staff. I know a lot of folks don't have that Monday off, but the FCC does.
We don't honor politically incorrect holidays.
Mitzi?
I just want to note that I'm getting married October 1st, so
Wow.
I may not be able to make the 14th, and I will try to get Rick Elrod to attend.
You probably wouldn't make the 7th
I definitely won't make the
either.
7th.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations.
I like you all a lot, but
You're not taking us on your honeymoon?
And there's always
if we
the web.
don't
You
go
can
right
attend
away
by
on the honeymoon, then I may be here on the 14th.
Okay. Well, that's a really good reason. Anything else? Any other input on that? Those are our dates. So I think that's probably it. You'll hear from us on the no surprises to be renamed. I think that's a really good idea. And as well as the last attempt on set-top box and anything else that might come up, and working groups to be continued. And thank you all. I think it's been a great day. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Oh, and I think we can all be unanimous in that. So thank you all for a great day.
Have a good trip back.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Are you getting married in Montgomery County?
No, I'm getting married in Los Angeles.